Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another exciting episode of Timcast IRL. I am Seamus Coughlin, filling in for Tim Pool, who is on a coming-of-age journey in theaters this November. In tonight's news, a California school district is going to have to pay $3 million for rejecting an LGBTQ curriculum covering Harvey Milk. The Stanford Dean of DEI resigns after supporting and encouraging a unruly student protest, and Congressman Matt Gaetz introduces legislation to prohibit funding for the Department of Justice for being used for special counsel Jack Smith's probe into Donald Trump. We're going to get into all of that and more, but first, hit that like button. And if you want to support what we're doing here, become a member at timcast.com so you can see our after hours show, the uncensored version where we're able to say some of the things that we can't say on YouTube, but would like to. Also, if you want to help support us in building culture and keeping the lights on, go over to castbrew.com and pick yourself up a bag of Cast Brew coffee. We're building culture. We're sponsoring ourselves. So head on over there and get yourself a bag. We are joined today by Daniel Turner, founder and executive director of Power of the Future. Daniel, thank you for coming back onto the show.
It is great to be on the show. Thank you. And I got a quick story for you all before
please.
We do intros, and I'll be brief. Friend of the show who watches it, a guy named Trevor. I do oil and gas and fossil fuel advocacy issues, energy job. I battle the green groups for a living. A friend of the show, Trevor, is from a small town called Greeley, Nebraska, population around 500. And as the Biden administration is dumping out billions and billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars for wind and solar, the small town of Greeley, Nebraska suddenly was told they're going to get this enormous wind farm. And they wanted many of the residents to sign 75-year leases, 75 years to turn over their land so that they could put up these wind farms. And Trevor, friend of the show, was like, something doesn't feel right, and saw me on an episode and said, we're doing a town hall, but we can't find people to talk about the other side of the issue. Would you come? So I flew to Greeley, Nebraska, didn't do any fundraising, wasn't trying to become famous. This is about them and their town. And it was around 3.5 hours of a town hall where I sat down with the residents and just talked about, what are wind turbines? What does it do? What is this company going to do? The funny thing is the company building the wind farm was there, but they refused to engage. They refused to talk about it. So when questions came up like, hey, this is tornado country. The tornado comes through and blows up this wind turbine and projectiles go in every direction and it goes through your house or your barn. Who cleans up, right? Who's liable for that? These wind turbines, right, they're moving pieces. They have thousands of gallons of fluid. If that fluid leaks, who cleans up? Are you responsible, or is the wind farm? What's the environmental impact study? I tell you, if we're going to drill for oil or gas, the amount of third-party environmental impact studies we have to do is astronomical. They got exempted from environmental impact studies. So I'm saying, look, I'm not telling you to vote against the wind farm. I'm just saying these are really good questions that you should get answers to before you sign over Grandpa's farm for 75 years. And so ended it very quickly with this. This audience is getting engaged, right? People on, you can call it the right, conservative, anti-establishment, however you want to frame it. People are a little tired of getting things shoved down their throat, whether it's COVID, whether it's green, whether it's trans. And to see this level of engagement that a member of this audience reached out and said, you know, you're an expert, come help us out. I hope more people do. And I'm looking at the camera. If your town's going through this with solar, with wind, if someone's coming in saying, we're going to take over your land for our agenda and you're nervous, you know, find me on Twitter or DM me or farm me, Daniel@powerofthefuture.com. So I just want to thank this show. I want to thank all of you because you're all part of it. And I want to thank Tim for putting it together, because when people like that, like you, Trevor, buddy, when people like that get involved, we will stop all of the bad nonsense that's happening in society. Like you said, taking over culture, taking our rights back. So thank you for the quick shout out. Thank you to the folks in Greeley, and thanks to this program, and great to be on.
Yeah. And again, it's great to have you back on, and it's always very encouraging to hear that there are audience members who are taking this very seriously and getting involved and trying to instantiate some change at the local level. That's really important. That's really important.
Yeah, so. It's amazing. It's awesome that you took the time to get out there, and I appreciate that you're willing to respond to your Twitter DMs and fly to Nebraska and help out, because that is kind of crazy that a company wanting to put wind turbines on your land just declines to talk to you. Not the start of a great relationship, in my opinion.
No, and there's so much money in the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill that this is going to happen more and more. And what does it do to the environment? What does it do to cattle? What does it do to aquifers? Again, I'm not saying all these things should stop happening. Obviously, I'm not in favor of wind and solar. I think they're useless products. But just ask hard questions. And heck, right before we went live, we were having a hard conversation. We agree on like a lot of trans issues. Ask hard questions. I just want to and when you try to shut down, I know we're going to get to shutting down debate, but when you try to shut down debate and conversation, boy, that should make people very nervous. Yeah. Anyone who doesn't want to answer questions and says stop asking them, oof. Like, you know where that person stands, right?
Yeah, so you definitely do. Well,
yeah, we've got some stories about that tonight, too.
Yeah. So thanks, folks.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you're here.
Hannah Claire.
I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for Timcast.com. I'm so happy to be back on another episode of Shimcast. Less happy about that. No, Seamus is doing a great job. He deserves a lot of credit. This is a lot of work.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm a writer for Timcast.com. I'm so glad to be here with our favorite music producer.
What's up, everyone? I'm Carter Banks. I do all things music here at Timcast, and I'm filling in for Ian tonight, who is on a mission to find where Tim is.
We wish him the best of luck.
Yeah, and, he's out there looking. He's very loyal, and I admire that.
It's been a hard week for him, you know?
Has been.
Yeah. And Serge is here.
Yeah, I'm here. I also produce music.
He does.
Oh man, I didn't realize how political I made this episode already. my favorite music producer who was employed by the company I'm employed by.
Hey, I mean, I'm not employed to do music, so it's okay.
You guys know I also produce music.
Oh, really?
You can't just declare yourself everything.
I do not produce music.
I also don't produce music.
To be honest, I also don't produce music.
But you are a journalist, so
I am a journalist.
Yeah, I'll let you do that.
There's great music in your
That's
Freedom
true.
Tunes.
We have parody songs. I have
they're
music.
awesome.
I take it back.
Me. Please help me.
Help you? What?
The show's already off the rails.
I've been asked to do music like your music before. It's like 8-bit kind of video game type music. It's very cool.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. Well, you're doing awesome stuff here with Tim.
Thank you, sir.
I think so. Well, speaking of things that aren't so awesome, California school is going to have to pay over $3 million after rejecting an LGBTQ curriculum. The curriculum covered Harvey Milk, who is the first openly gay elected official in the United States, who was assassinated in 1978. Here's the thing about Harvey Milk. He was known to have been preying on underage boys. He was in a quote-unquote relationship with a 16-year-old at one point when he was in his 30s. But of course, children have to learn about him in school as if he's a hero. And this district, the school board said, no, sorry, we're not interested in teaching our kids that. So Newsom said, we're going to fine you $1.5 million and force you to pay another $1.6 million in shipping costs associated with the material that were sent to these schools. So we're seeing stories like this all the time. I'm glad to see that the school board is fighting back. Look at Newsom, who claims to be the gatekeeper and the warrior for free speech when he's talking about book bans and the fact that all ideas need to be allowed in California, telling people that they actually have to have this curriculum forced on them when their school board has said, no, we don't want this.
There's a hill you have to die on, and eventually, otherwise you keep losing. And I think, again, it's easy for me to say this because it's not my school or it's not my $3 million, but the answer is no. Yeah. We're just not going to pay that fine, and we're not going to teach it. And are you going to extort $3 million from us? Are you going to shut down the school? Well, then you know what? You shut down the school. Sorry. Like eventually you just have to stop giving into this because if school boards, what's the purpose of having a school board? If then the governor can just override it, and then the governor is overridden by the Department of Education, and where does it end? So ultimately, it's really just Joe Biden. Joe Biden decides everything.
That's absolutely right. Well, I mean, these people are all tyrannical, and it's so frustrating because you had Obama come out the other day and write this letter saying, oh, it's wrong to ban books. And of course, the books that are being banned here are generally pornographic. They contain materials that are scarring for children. And it's the parents who are saying we don't want our children to see this content. The vast majority of these quote unquote book bans are led by parental groups. And even opponents of that will acknowledge this, but they'll say these are parents who are backwards religious fundamentalists, even though firstly, as far as I'm aware, I don't know that there's actually a strong religious component to it. I would imagine there is, just in the sense that we're in a country which is based on Christian values. But these people, I know some of the people who go up and fight these school boards, and they're not all religious people by any means. So the left will try to smear these people. They'll try to smear the grassroots efforts to get this pornographic content out of schools. And the truth is, it's because they know that's the only option. They can't try to blame the usual actors, the big donors, any corrupt political class for this. They can tell this is coming from parents. This is coming from families who are saying, stop preying upon our children.
And I think you'll see these tests going forward. This idea that you don't want this type of curriculum in your school for what seems to be legitimate reasons, and so you will have to pay a fine. So you feel guilty, and so you don't feel like maybe we shouldn't do that. It's going to hurt our kids' education. These tests are going to be something that parents unfortunately face a lot. It reminds me a little bit of this story about the school district in Utah. A liberal parent said, "Well, I think you should ban the Bible because the Bible talks about sex and the Bible has pornographic scenes."
But it doesn't.
And one of the
have pornographic scenes.
One of the state lawmakers who had been really pushing to keep LGBTQ curriculum, and again, I should say sexually explicit curriculum out of school, said, well, if this is the price we have to pay, that's okay, because I would rather make sure that your kids are protected, even if that means they have to learn about the Bible at home. And I find it interesting that we're coming up against these tests pretty regularly right now. If we have to keep something out, what are we willing to do for that?
I think a great tactic that I've seen a lot of parents do is they try to go to the school board meetings and they try to read the book out loud.
Yes.
Yeah,
and they're
I've seen
stopped.
that.
I think DeSantis did it at a press conference and all the networks had to go to commercial break.
Yeah.
And that's just the most valuable time. If I can't say this to you, and we're all adults here, if I said these things right now, YouTube would find Timcast. I mean, it wouldn't find me, so I guess I can go ahead and say them, right? I can drop the F-bomb. It's not my show.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
Do whatever you want here.
And
Do whatever
Tim's
you want.
not here,
No
so
rules.
Tim's not here. Who cares? But I think that's such a valuable tactic. Like show how vile these things are, and then stop hiding behind gay people to do it. Stop. It's pornography. Don't hide. It's either sexual exploitation of children. Stop using gay people as your shield because you're a bunch of perverts. It's quite frankly very.
I gotta say, the
exhausting.
book we have right here, I opened it to a random page, and just the first thing I saw was like, I can't even describe it. It was disgusting.
It's vicious. It's really disgusting. And so genderqueer is one example of this. The other example we've brought up, because we actually have the book here, is this book is gay. And this is a book that is in schools and school libraries, and it actually explains how to sign up for gay hookup apps. Now, here's the thing. It does say, oh, these apps are for adults. But hold on a second. This stuff, the way smartphones work with their interface, it's not rocket science. Adults can figure it out. Why is there a guide on how to sign up for these apps in schools where minors can check them out? You don't put something in a book that a minor shouldn't know and then write, if you're under 18, don't read past this point, or this section isn't for you.
And
That's
then
not how this
wink at
works.
you. They're like,
exactly.
Don't do it. We're just going to put it here and let you make your own decisions. I think that's the craziest thing, that the argument that comes up and that I hear pretty frequently is, people need to hear these things because we need to have a sex positive culture, and we need to have a culture that these issues are life and death for some people, because if you don't know, you don't feel affirmed, this, that, and the other, then, you're in danger of all kinds of terrible things. And of course, we want to live in a compassionate society. But does that mean minors need to read sexually explicit content in schools? No, it doesn't.
Well, no, but here's the thing. They say, we want a sex positive society. What does that mean? What does it mean? What does sex positive mean? They're trying to negate the purpose of sex by spreading perversion. By definition, they are sex negative. The purpose of sex is unity and procreation. If you're trying to strip that away from it, you are negating it. You are sex negative. What they're really trying to say is we want to spread perversion. That's all. That's all.
I think we're sexualized enough as a society.
Yeah. I mean, do
Right?
you get
you can't watch any commercial without it being. You can't watch any music video, minus a couple of country ones. You really can't watch much without it being about sex.
Exactly. How much of a pervert do you have to be to complain about the fact that there's not enough of it out there all the time?
And should we be telling teenagers your sexual identity is the biggest thing you should know and identify and think about all the time, right? Isn't there enough pressure as a young adult to come of age and to grapple with difficult life problems? Like, do we need to say your libraries need to be stocked with this, so you're thinking about it all the time, when really we should be encouraging them to pursue their intellectual passions, to develop good moral character, right? Like, there is no reason that this should be the number one conversation you have with your teens, no matter how you think their orientation will end up.
Especially when you consider, and I hate saying this because I don't like to knock America. I love this country and I love the people in this country, but I will say it bluntly, especially when you realize how ignorant our young people are. Like, you can say poorly educated, and they are. You could just flat out and say dumb. Like, these are subjects that, A, we shouldn't broach them ever, But if all of our kids had straight A's and then the school board was like, well, should we start thinking about other things? But our kids are incredibly dumb.
Yes.
Like they basically, you see the numbers, 30%, 35% don't read at level, can't perform math at level. Most of them can't write or read script. So you scratch your head and say, well, we want our young people to be sex positive. It's like, I just like them to be literate first. Like, can we just do the basics?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and any adult who like tells you they have this agenda, like, oh yeah, I want this child to be really accepting of a lot of different sexual things. Like, okay,
but why?
Because I've said this before on the show, but we ask this question as conservatives. Why do kids need to see that? That's the wrong question. The question is, why do you need to show that to a kid? Why are you so invested in ensuring that a kid sees that? And I think we all know
no
why.
kid likes to read about sex until they are a certain age. And it's I don't care if it's hetero, homo, it doesn't matter. Like they're introducing it to children at an age that it's so uncomfortable, and it should be uncomfortable. It's healthy. Like a 9-year-old should not be a sexual being. And when they say, well, everyone is a sexual being, if you think a 9-year-old is a sexual being, you are a pedophile.
You belong in jail.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, it's different when you're talking about especially guys, you know, and they're hitting their hormones, and they would read any book that's, well, maybe not those, but they'd be more interested in sex books and sex talks. But the fact that we're doing this with 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds is just so disgusting.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, I just want to mention one thing quickly. Even with what you're saying, like when kids go through puberty and they start noticing the opposite sex, you're right that they have an interest there. But that's also why you need to be even more protective at that point and ensure that they don't end up seeing disgusting things that are going to pervert them. Because they'll end up going and seeking out material, and there's so much perversion online that they'll stumble into. The solution isn't like, well, let's show them the weirdest, grossest stuff we can find. The solution is educate them on the dangers of looking at pornography. Talk to them about the fact that researchers are discovering a strong link between pornography and impotence. You tell young men that, I promise you, that's going to alter their behavior, right? People need to be protected from these things. These things shouldn't be forced onto them. But again, I think we're all pretty clear on what the agenda is here. We know why there's an interest on the part of so many people in this system to get minors invested in this perverse content. And it's telling that the reason this school board rejected this content that California is trying to force on them is because it was covering the first elected gay politician in the country who's celebrated by the left and viewed as a martyr, and who was exploiting and preying upon and abusing underage boys.
Yeah.
Had a 16-year-old quote unquote boyfriend when he was in his 30s. That's not a boyfriend. It's a minor he groomed.
I haven't seen said chapter. I'd love to know what the chapter was, because that's what they're saying. Like, this was a book that was explaining that Harvey Milk was killed in 19 whatever year it was.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you it was not that. You know, and if you had a chapter of the 70s for 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, and you talked about unrest in the 70s, famous people who were assassinated, you can go through the list. You can throw his name down because he was famous and he was assassinated. But I would love to see the actual chapter.
What are they saying about his life?
Because I guarantee you it was not that innocuous. Like, we just mentioned that he was a gay politician who was killed. I'm like, oh, no, you didn't. You know? No, you didn't.
Did they make a whole movie with Sean Penn in it?
Yeah.
I don't think they mentioned any of that.
Oh, there's a lot they'll fail to mention in these different biopics they do about these perverse figures they celebrate.
Wait, you think Hollywood would leave? No.
Wait a minute.
No.
I know. Well, I've mentioned before that there was a film produced about Alfred Kinsey where Liam Neeson played him. Alfred Kinsey, the person. Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes, Liam Neeson played Alfred Kinsey in a film where they celebrate him as this heroic, like self-sacrificing saint scientist. And, you know, he was just interested in studying sex in this puritanical society. Of course, what they leave out with the fact is that he was complicit in the sexual abuse of literally hundreds of underage boys, including infants. They don't mention the fact that in his published work, he said things that supported and endorsed pedophilia by saying that when a child is abused, what really traumatizes them is their parents', in his words, overreaction to it, as if you can overreact to something so horrible. It's disgusting. They celebrate disgusting things. It's great to see this school board pushing back.
It's kind of like when the left talks about Margaret Sanger and they forget that to mention that her purpose in starting this organization was to eradicate black people.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we just talk about her for women's rights. It's like, do you want the full story or not the full story?
There was a video that I'm pretty sure Lena Dunham narrated, and it was like, here's the history on Planned Parenthood. And they got to the point about eugenics, and she's like, she was kind of involved in eugenics, but we're just going to ignore that. And you're like, what are you talking about? This is crazy. And that's just the mission, though. If they can scrub enough of history and make it easier to digest through movies, then you will learn to ignore these things. In fact, you will forget them. And I think that's one of the best parts about this is not only is it a local community really advocating for what they want and what their values are, but also saying like, we aren't going to overlook this person's sordid past because you guys have refashioned him as a hero.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking with the problems that exist within modern education, Stanford Law's equity dean is booted out after stoking woke students' rude protest at a conservative judge who was invited to give a talk. So a Stanford dean who was slammed for letting students heckle a conservative federal judge before berating him herself has left her role. Basically, what happened was this judge came to speak on campus. The students protested. He went to basically explain that it was unacceptable, that it was impossible to hear him because he was being spoken over, and she went on to berate him. So she has decided that she's going to be leaving her role as assistant dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are they going to do without her at Stanford Law School to pursue another opportunity? The law school said in an email to its students Thursday. What do you guys think about this story?
Do you think that they have more DEI coordinators at that school? Do you think she was the only one, or do you think Stanford has a couple?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but there is a notorious shortage of DEI professionals in this country. We actually might run out of them, which is very frightening.
It is scary.
Because who keeps the country running?
How do we keep any of this going without them? Right. I mean, there are so many things to critique about the story. First off, let's be glad to see the end of administrative bloat in universities. Famously, that's terrible for any functioning university. This particular story just makes me laugh. We're talking about it a little bit beforehand, but the fact that, you know, this event was on March 9th, and this Trump-appointed federal judge, Kyle Duncan, came to speak. He was invited there by the Federal Society. He gets shouted down. He asks for an administrator. She comes in and is berating him, saying that, you know, he's hurtful and he's tearing this society community apart.
Disenfranchising student rights.
Right. But then afterwards...
I hate disenfranchising.
But then afterwards, me too. A couple students wrote for the Stanford Review saying, she sent out an email beforehand engineering chaos. She came in with prepared remarks. They called, I really appreciate this from the students. They called Stanford out and said, you say you value free speech, then you need to hold this person accountable because she intentionally went against it. Now, of course, this battle continued to be public, and Steinbach, the woman involved, wrote her own op-ed that the Wall Street Journal published being like, I was just there to de-escalate.
Of course.
I don't know what happened, but it could not have been that I was at all inciting this. And so you get these conflicting accounts. And I find this deeply interesting. She said that she was there to represent the student voices so they could stop shouting, which means that like she came in with
and
a
started
side.
shouting. Yeah, well, firstly, of course, she was just trying to calm things down. That's what a DEI officer does as a university at a university.
It's not
they
about
go there and they try
dividing
to make peace.
people by their identity at all.
Also, I love this excuse. This is golden. This is like such an incredible attempt at spin. I almost admire it. When all the students were heckling this person and I went up there and began heckling them, it's because I was trying to stop the students from doing it. I was trying to give them an outlet. This is what I have begun to call outlet theory. Basically, what left-wing people will try to do to justify the normalization of bad behavior is they'll say, this bad thing is going to happen anyway, so we need to give it an outlet. And of course, what you end up doing is encouraging it to continue to happen, and you get more of it. And I think it's not surprising that this is the excuse she went with, because it actually fits into the framework of a left-wing worldview and the excuses they usually make. No. The only reason I was doing bad thing is because I wanted to give bad thing an outlet, because I'm actually against bad thing on some level. It's totally incoherent.
Well, it's funny that she's diversity and inclusion, and she seemed to lack both of those as her role, right? I mean, there was no diversity in terms of intellectual diversity. And what about inclusion? You know, whatever happened, it's funny how, you know, when I was a kid, they would say, well, if you don't like it, turn off the channel, or if you don't like it, don't listen to that album. And now it's the right saying that. If you don't want to go listen to this judge, just don't go to the lecture. Yeah. And it's like, that is
it's
not allowed.
Like he got surprised in a class that you had to be in, right? Like, this was an event organized by the Federal Society for him to come to, that everyone probably knew it was going to be this guy, which is what made them want to go there, right? And I'm not against the concept of protesting. It just makes me crazy that the idea is that this person had to be completely shouted down rather than this institution that's supposed to be about learning and growth and having your ideas challenged.
And this is manufactured protesting, because we're all pretty smart, with the exception of this one. Name another judge Right, like name another, not Supreme Court. I can name them. Name a federal judge. I bet you none of us really could. So, what college student is like? You're telling me Judge Duncan Kyle is no? Like this isn't a name that is like
That's
hilarious.
It's
That's a really
all
good point.
manufactured
Because he was appointed by Trump.
It's
that was
all
the whole
manufactured.
point. And I will say,
especially when you're in college, like who's actually reading flyers? You know, like
I
so
certainly wasn't
someone-
reading them or going to those things.
Someone manufactured this crisis and got all the kids whipped up, and now the kids are all in a frenzy, which is sad how much of lemming the college students can become.
so it's interesting then that, of course, the students point out that Steinbach, this DEI administrator, sent out an email about this event.
Yeah.
It's almost
Yes.
like maybe she was interested in there being a protest so she could have a nice
She
viral
had him
clip
come
moment.
down.
Yeah.
She is actually invited.
Did she arrange all of
Yeah.
this?
Well, I will say,
him.
I think what I found the most interesting about the story, because it's played out over a couple months, is that at least 2 federal judges said, we're adding Stanford to our no hire list. We will not take clerks from Stanford Law, which means that every student at Stanford is affected by this. Of course, I
Good.
assume they're conservatives.
Yeah.
If you're out there at Stanford Law, I hope you're doing well. But it comes on the heels of a different similar event at Yale Law School. So there are now a stack of law schools that there are judges, and I think this is great. They're saying, I will not hire from your school. I do not like your school and your student body's stance on free speech and diversity, and I do not like the way you're treating conservatives. That's unacceptable to me. You would not be a good fit for my office. And again, I think these small changes, this school district taking a stance, these judges saying like, we won't tolerate it. Of course, some people suffer in the crosshairs. I'm sure the young conservatives at Yale and Stanford
yeah.
are like, well, dang, man.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, good for the judges for doing something and not sitting around being like, well, we can't get involved. And,
Yes.
you know, this, that, and the other.
Push back. If they're going to try to use their leverage against you to undermine civil society, you got to push back. Daniel, you mentioned something earlier, how the left always used to say, if you don't like it, you can change the channel, and how they're hypocritical for not sticking to that. But I think what you're missing is what they were saying is, if you don't like it, you can change the channel. Those are the options that you have. When I don't like it, you change the channel.
Yeah.
It's always been about dominance, right? Evil calls for tolerance until it's in charge, and then it demands your submission.
Yeah, remember when the riots were happening in the summer of love, and even you can go back further, even in the Trump inauguration in 2017, to go off your point, Seamus, when a lot of mayors said, look, we're just giving them space to protest. And you're like, well, you're letting them burn the city down. I was like, we're just giving them space to protest. And that's what this was. That was what this diversity DEI coordinator was saying. I am just giving them a platform to express their ideas, and I partook of it because I wanted to try to control the violence. And again, if you give people a space to do, if you give bad people a space to commit bad acts, they will commit bad acts.
Well, and this is part of what's so hilarious just about how quickly they expose themselves as complete and total unprincipled hypocrites. I remember during the 2020 riots, there were 2 things I kept hearing from left-wing individuals. First thing, rioting is the language of the unheard.
Yes.
Okay, so that's one quote. Let's all just keep in mind.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, isn't that? Thank you.
really
Isn't
is.
that? Doesn't that just touch your heart?
Poetry.
And then there was a second point that they kept making repeatedly. I saw this all over Twitter. I saw left-wing people I knew saying this. They were going, well, conservatives claim the point of 2A is to like fight back against tyranny. And why aren't they helping us as we are here trying to fight back against tyranny? So literally, by the way, calling for insurrection, right? And then just a few months later, on January 6th, when we had conservatives rioting, well, all of a sudden the response was to make sure they were as unheard as possible. And as many conservatives from social media ban Donald Trump. Ban Donald Trump, the sitting president of the United States, from one of the largest communication platforms in the world. You're going to tell me you thought rioting was the language of the unheard, and the way you get rioting is by silencing people, and then you silenced the person
And then criticize
who you
them for
believe
not stopping it.
Exactly. And who you believe is the figurehead in the voice of the people who were rioting. And then all of a sudden, insurrection became a bad thing that we weren't supposed to be in favor of and weren't supposed to tolerate and we're supposed to be very against. Meanwhile, just a few months ago, on May 29th of 2021, left-wing radicals surrounded the White House, broke down the barrier, forced the president of the United States and his family into the presidential bunker, and the entire media laughed about it and said it was so mean that Donald Trump cleared those protesters out of there before they tried to burn down St. John's.
Yeah.
Well, you're forgetting the most important verse in the modern religion, which is, it's okay when we do it, Progressives 23:16.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
You don't understand.
Yes.
If
We got to know the sacred
it's okay
texts.
because we are on a moral high ground, right? So when we say these people are rioting because they're unheard, we are correct. And when we're saying you guys are rioting because you're evil and the devil, we are also right. There's no arguing there because there's no consistent logic and there's no consistent application of values.
Yeah, it's funny that this decision came out today when there was that House hearing on censorship, and I'm glad there's hearings on censorship. There has to be more of a conversation about it, especially when you're in the college level, right? If you're encouraging this type of behavior on what is supposed to be an academic environment to look at all ideas and discover knowledge, etc., you're doing your students a great injustice. And college kids are young. They may not be minors, right? Most of them are 18 and older, so they are legal adults, but they are very young and very impressionable. And it's a travesty to see. Well, it's following off the earlier conversation, right? We're teaching our young children to be perverts, and we're teaching our college children to be dumb and closed-minded. And it's tragic because you have now a growing society of just dumb perverts.
Well, yes, thank you. Couldn't have said it better myself. And what I'll also add is that the two go hand in hand, right? I think a huge part of why they want to erode these children's sense of identity and pervert them is one, because again, they want to reproduce themselves in some sense. They want to make other people's children into perverts. But on top of that, if you get a person completely inward focused with their proclivities and their sexual tendencies, it actually dulls their intellect and they're less interested in learning about the world and other people, and they become a lot less critical because they have to spend their life trying to justify something irrational, so they don't become well practiced in applying rational principles to their life, and so they become less interested in seeking the truth. I'm not saying that everyone who does anything bad ever is going to be completely unable to see any truth. I'm just saying that these kinds of actions make it more difficult for a person to see reality.
Well, I think when you encourage anyone to be a narcissist, you dull their senses to do anything else, right? And if you tell people that smoking weed is the most important thing you could do, or any other aspect, if you encourage narcissism in young people and you make learning well, look at the subject, the line that's very common now is, your truth. Your truth. What is your truth? And so if that becomes your compass, then your senses are dulled to any other objective learning or objective ideas, and then you become very angry. And what do angry people do? They burn and break things because they're dumb. And dumb people, that's how they lash out. It's kind of inevitable.
Dumb and angry, two not good combination of things to be.
And an all too common combination. I mean, there are some things it's worth getting angry about, but man, this is not necessarily just a smart or dumb thing. It's also a virtue versus vice thing. Everyone can have a temper. Everyone can get angry. The question is, do you rationally analyze the situation? And one thing I'm really trying to promote here that we were talking about last night is the fact that the battle between good and evil runs through every man's heart. We can criticize these people for letting their temper get the better of them and doing horrible things, but you got to ask yourself, in my personal life, do I get mad at the people I love for things that weren't necessarily their fault? Am I too quick to anger? Am I wrathful? These are things we got to figure out for ourselves if we want to promote them in society.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think the hard truth is that conservatives believe in emotional regulation in a way that is not true everywhere, right? So if you have this idea that I need to be aware of your feelings and be respectful of them, but I don't have to change everything about myself to make you happy, right? That has evolved to be a very conservative way of thinking. And I think there is endless pressure in different circles to have other people's feelings at the forethought of everything you do, so much so that you are wired to seek approval from the group, right? And so
that's a huge part of it.
In this story that we could potentially whip a class of law school students up into a fury over this judge who, you're completely right, they have never heard of this guy. All they know about him is that he was appointed by Trump. And that was enough for them to be like, well, if you're going, I'm going, and I'm mad too. And I'm definitely, I'm mad genuinely. No, I'm very, very mad. Just picture,
I'm so angry.
Picture the NPC heads, right? Just being like, yes, mad, Trump, mad.
Yeah.
That's very sad that these are our young legal minds, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's not everyone. I feel bad for all the Stanford law students who I'm just throwing under the bus with everyone else. But it is interesting that the idea that emotions come first and that compliance to the group and emotional satisfaction through that is the driving force. That should be unnerving to you.
Yeah, I mean, they're not doing a good job teaching law students how to interact with a judge, but continue.
I was going to say, well, how many Stanford law students were whipped up to this much frenzy that not very far from their campus are thousands of homeless people who are defecating on themselves, totally stoned, sleeping on the floor, eating garbage, being stepped over by society. Have they ever been whipped into a frenzy about those policies? And you can make a list of all this. And there are a lot of things that you could get whipped into a frenzy about in society. There's a lot that's going wrong in society. But yeah, to be whipped into this judge is going to speak. This judge I heard of 4 minutes ago. And yeah, how sad. I think the NPC character nodding is fantastic.
All of them wearing the Stanford sweatshirt.
Absolutely. Yeah. One more point I'll make about this before we move on to our next topic, just to piggyback off what you said, Hannah Claire, about these kids falling in line. That's another huge part of this. It feels good to be part of an in-group. And so if you have spent your life habituating yourself towards doing what feels good rather than what makes sense, which is what we're habituated to do, and what our educational system is actually promoting, then you're not going to think to stand up against the group. You're going to obey. But our next story here, Florida's Matt Gaetz to introduce a bill defunding Jack Smith investigation targeting Trump. We must act. So this is a bit of a follow-up on a story we told, I believe, 2 days ago, where Trump is insisting that he's going to be arrested at some point because of this investigation. But Representative Matt Gaetz announced Tuesday he would be introducing legislation in the House of Representatives to defund Special Counsel Jack Smith's grand jury investigation into the January 6th Capitol riot and efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. I will be introducing legislation to defund Jack Smith's witch hunt against President Trump, Gaetz wrote on Twitter just hours after former President Donald Trump confirmed on social media that he had been notified he was the target in an investigation and expected to face an arrest and indictment. They are attacking our democracy and engaging in election interference right now. The United States Congress has the capacity to stop this election interference, and we must act immediately, Gaetz added. So how do you guys feel about this? Are you happy with what Gaetz is doing here? Do you think this is the proper strategy to prevent something like this to occur? Does he have any other choice? And what do you think is going to come of the investigation into Donald Trump? We know they've been desperately trying to nail him on anything. Is this what they're going to finally be able to cook up some trumped up charges on?
Well, Smith's been trying to get the trial moved aggressively to December, which would put him right at the heart of the beginning of the primary season debates. And people say, well, okay, there's no statute of limitation on this quote unquote crime. So we don't have to do it in December. We could do it in 2026. What's the rush to have it done now? And the rush clearly is to interfere with the election. So I don't think Congress has any other options, right? The other options are, sadly, the riots, but I don't want that to happen, right? I don't want to see America devolve into chaos, but the MAGA movement is big and they're not going to be quiet about it. And so I think it's a first step of hopefully de-escalating what is otherwise an abuse of the DOJ. It's a clear violation, or it's a clear interference in the election.
Right.
And for the Biden administration to say, whoa, hey, look, this is just the DOJ acting autonomously and independently, and we have no comment. Karine Jean-Pierre is constantly saying, I have, asked them about it. I think if this were happening in the Congo, we would laugh at it. Right.
Yep.
When this happens in Russia and Vladimir Putin's opponents all suddenly disappear,
right,
or get arrested, we laugh at it. And so I applaud them taking some action legally, and they have the power of the purse. And so this is their jurisdiction. And I think we should see more of it.
Yeah. When I was reading the story today, I guess I hadn't totally put together that Smith is responsible not just for the January 6th investigation, but he's also the one leading the probe into the classified documents issue that led to the raid on Mar-a-Lago. Trump just pled last month not guilty to 37 charges stemming from that investigation. I can't help but feel like there's some kind of conflict that this guy who's already leading an investigation that is going to trial was like, great, so now that we've got those charges under, we're starting another one. Here we go. Right. That seems like complete conflict of interest. Like, why would we continue to fund money towards this person? Exactly like what you're saying, when it seems like there is a clear timeline issue. You have to question intent when someone who could bring these charges later is like, no, but we have to do them now.
Yeah.
And also now that I have some charges on the table, I want more.
Exactly.
How will we know he's not going to open up a third investigation? Like, this is going to go on and on and on.
They can do this all day long. And so this is from gates.house.gov. The power of the purse is not some intermittent thing that we wield every fiscal cycle. It's something that we have to wield in and day out to achieve victory for our people and stop this. I'm under no illusion that the Democrats will bring such legislation up in the Senate, but the American people deserve to know where Congress members stand. I think that's exactly right. I think that's completely fair. I think that something does have to be done about this. And you're right. The timing of this investigation is more than a little suspicious. Yeah. The idea that, well, this is the DOJ and they just have no common interest. Look, the Department of Justice said after Roe was overturned that they were going to essentially dishonor what the court wanted. They were going to make sure that these procedures were as protected as they possibly could be. They were also going to increase their vigilancy against violations of the FACE Act, and what that ended up resulting in was trumped up charges against Mark Houck. The idea that the left-wing political apparatus isn't collaborating with itself because it has so much respect for the idea of checks and balances within the United States government, when these people repeatedly say by any means necessary and that they're interested in the process and not the results, isn't just hopelessly naive. It's actually cynical. These people know what they're doing. They know why they're saying the things that they're saying, and they're exploiting the American people's good faith.
I remember back in 2016 when there were all the Trump-Clinton things breaking, and there was Russiagate, right, and the PP tape and all that, and you always saw the name. You saw the name Peter Strzok, and then there was Hillary Clinton, the 33,000 emails, and you saw the name Peter Strzok. And I remember thinking, does anyone else work at the DOJ? Right, like how come this one guy?
He is the DOJ.
And that's what I think of with Jack Smith now. It's like everything is his case. Like, doesn't the DOJ have 40,000 people who work there? How come this one guy seems to be getting all the big cases?
2 probes into Trump right now.
How come he never goes to a supervisor and is? Can I just have something else off my plate? Like, I'm really busy these days.
I don't want to delegate anything.
It's very funny how the same people get all of these cases.
Right.
I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
It's just a coincidence that he's probably not definitely being like, okay, but what's the next thing I can bring against Trump?
Yeah.
Like,
how is it not suspicious to people that the man is continually investigated by people who hate him, and every investigation up until this point has shown that he was innocent, that he was not guilty of the thing that they were alleging, and they just keep launching new investigations into him, and we're supposed to believe it's not politically motivated. It's insane.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of cases of this right now where, with this case it's DOJ, but there are a lot of attorney generals, and Trump has experienced this with Letitia James in New York, who will say, we think you did something wrong. Give us all your private information and confidential data, and we'll go through it, and then we'll decide what charges we're bringing against you.
Just as the founders intended.
Just as the founders intended. This is the America they promised me, right? Where you are under investigation, you are subject to subpoena, you have to comply, or else be brought up on some other kind of charges, unless they decide they like you, right? Like, this is completely about political favoritism. It's not about justice. It's not about accepting that some people have different values than you do.
They found a bag of cocaine at the White House.
But we don't know.
Like, who cares?
Could be anybody's.
George Washington left that there.
No idea.
Exactly. And it could be anybody's. Yeah, let's find out who. That makes it scarier.
And
it could be anyone at the White House. This bag of coke. Who's doing this?
And shouldn't we be concerned that the Secret Service, who's tasked with protecting the president, can't tell you where that came from? That makes them look terrible. And instead, they're just like, okay, well, that's over. We don't know.
It's funny, though, as that was coming out, I know we're devolving, but I had been in the West Wing a number of times when I was in the Bush administration. And at first they made it sound like it was in this public door that everyone walks through. And she kept saying, Marie Jean-Pierre kept saying, it's a highly trafficked area. And then they narrowed it. And then when they finally confirmed where it was, you say, like, you can't go. I couldn't go down there, right? No one can go.
She meant drug traffic.
It's so funny. You can narrow the scope of who has access to that room, and it's
actually a Hunter Biden shaped hole. That's what the door is. It's the only
place. It's hard to say.
Like the God-shaped hole I have in my heart. There's a Hunter Biden shaped hole in the White House.
No, it's just wild.
Just hysterical.
And again, I think that the Biden administration should be embarrassed that they're sacrificing the Secret Service. Like, you're saying, as the president, you're not concerned that the people tasked with protecting you can't figure out where that came from. or else the obvious. You know what I mean?
It's the same as the SCOTUS leaker, right? It could be anybody.
Don't go after him.
Well, okay, it could be anybody, but how many people see the unredacted draft version of documents, right? Everyone, do you? It's like, well, we know. So
everyone sees that. Everyone knew what the Supreme Court was doing.
Okay, so we know it's this chord. Now let's get going, right? So they make it sound like why do you treat us like children? Just stop pretending that we're dumb. The American people, I know I just called them dumb perverts, and that's sad, but for the most part, the American people are not that stupid.
Well, they lie. We know that they're lying. They know that we know that they're lying. We know that they know that we know that they know that they're lying.
It's like
they still lie to us.
Romantic. This is like a love song,
I think that was Solzhenitsyn.
Yeah, maybe.
Yes. That was down the heart of everyone.
They continue to. I think on some level, it almost comes across as a humiliation ritual. Like, come on, this is what you're going with. You don't know who it belonged to. You're not going to investigate that. Also, I mean, you just see how diametrically opposed the situation is with Trump and Joe Biden, or those two situations respectively. Trump has had every single element of his life turned upside down and had a flashlight shown on it, and we have not found any illegal activity.
I was going to say, he might be the most innocent person ever.
I know, and this is the thing. When he first ran, I liked him because of who his enemies were, and he grew on me. But I wasn't going to say, I know that this guy's innocent. I know these investigations are phony. When the Russiagate stuff first came out and they made these announcements, I went, maybe, I have no idea. Let's see. But then as time went on, and I think I just assumed because he was running for office that he had legal skeletons in his closet, because that seems to be a requirement in the United States.
Right.
But as time went on and they kept launching these investigations, I went, oh my goodness, this guy's squeaky clean. Yeah. This guy is squeaky clean. Now, with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, we literally have whistleblowers at the IRS coming forward, two of them at once, to say that the investigation into Hunter was slow-walked and that every effort was made to ensure that they weren't going to find anything and they weren't going to give him a conviction. We had Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday at the House basically speaking with one of these whistleblowers and alleging that Hunter was paying prostitutes with company money and then writing it off. I mean, you actually have red flags. You even have smoking guns here when you look at what's on the laptop, and there's not an investigation. And then when there is an investigation, the lightest possible charges, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all knew something was up as soon as they announced, oh, actually, he's guilty, and here's this deal that we gave him where no consequences will befall.
This morning, I saw like more ridiculous pictures surface of him. Like it's desensitized to it now.
It's complete arrogance on Hunter Biden's part. First off, he knew his dad has been in public office his entire life, and you're telling me this guy didn't think to file his taxes? Like, absolutely not. That's complete arrogance. The other thing is, with the whistleblower yesterday, and I just have to say this and I'll let you go. My favorite part was when he was like talking to Marjorie Taylor Greene. He was like, oh yeah, yes, we do believe at certain points he was paying for escorts and listing it this way. And you know, there's a $10,000 golf club membership here. We believe that's for a sex club. Like, this guy feels as though no rules apply to him. Yeah. And
that's just insane.
That should tell you enough about the Biden family.
I think it's impressive that you say like he should be filing his taxes. I think he should not be taking pictures of himself doing blow with hookers.
Look, I don't have high hopes.
No, but you're right.
Not a good idea.
I just don't have high hopes for him. You know what I mean?
How many crackheads do you think file taxes? It's actually kind of impressive that he does that at all. He's looking for write-offs and workarounds and stuff.
That sounds like a bad joke. How many crackheads file their taxes? How many?
He's incredibly wealthy. Someone else files his taxes for him, and he still couldn't do it. Meanwhile, he's got an entire laptop full of this disgusting stuff. Like, the bar could not be lower for this person, and he still cannot meet it. And we're expected as the public to accept that he gets a different type of justice than everyone else.
I saw someone make fun of Marjorie Taylor Greene when she was holding up those photos, and they were pretty graphic. And they were like, hey, what do you think this is? Kindergarten? Put those photos.
Well, no, this is another part of it too. So what routinely happens, this is what routinely happens. The Democrats or in the left either do something disgusting or introduce something disgusting into the discourse, and then when we point it out, they go, why are you pointing at that disgusting thing? Like, Marjorie, why'd you show that? That's the president of the United States' son. That's what he's doing. There's also evidence of illegal activity here that should be looked into. I think that's a good reason, and I think it's important to grab people's attention about this stuff. We know that if it was Don Jr., we'd see all of that and far more. And so, again, every effort is made to spare these people. Every single effort is made to ensure there's no accountability. When you have them trying to put this pornographic content in schools, whoever shows people that there's this pornographic content is now the bad guy. Even when we had a guest on, and Tim brought up some of the consequences of these horrific trans surgeries, these bodily mutilations. The response from the guest was a response you get from a lot of left-wingers, which is, ew, why are you talking about this? Because you people have created this. You've normalized this. It's not the direction we want our country to go in, and we should speak out against it.
Yeah.
It's sickening. It's sickening. But there are some... Huh? What are you laughing at?
Just
you gonna interrupt me?
Just the rage in this room. I feel like we all drank coffee right before we got here.
I've been drinking Coke, not doing Coke. But and if I was doing it, I would take photos and post them on my laptop and then leave it somewhere. Look,
all decent human beings who believe there are no consequences to their actions.
As bad as the Coke is and the hookers is and all the bad stuff, there is nothing worse than sleeping with your dying brother's wife.
It's pretty bad.
And that is the sign of the most immoral person. You left the wife, your wife, and the mother of your children to hook up with your dying brother's wife. And I say this often, and it's cruel, but I don't think Biden died of cancer. I think he died of familial shame, because that is a disgusting family.
Yes.
That is a disgusting family. And I couldn't embrace my son. I love the prodigal son, but it would be hard to embrace your son and welcome him to the White House knowing that he is sleeping with your dying son's wife.
Well, do we know that? Hold on.
And as a close follow-up...
Was he still alive, by the way? I'm saying it's horrible that it was the widow, but when
son.
he's still...
Maybe he was already...
It's still horrible.
Yeah.
I just hadn't heard that he was still alive.
My close follow-up is impregnating a stripper and then denying the child's father and not letting them use her last name, even though that could benefit her in some circles.
She got some art. She gave her some paintings.
Some art, and he's going to pay,
paintings.
and then her grandfather, the president of the United States, is going to pretend that he doesn't have one more grandchild than he does. Like, this family is bizarre. Why is this our first family?
Didn't Joe Biden's first wife die in a car crash?
Yeah,
or
and his
weird
daughter.
Like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
awesome.
He had 3 kids.
It's a horrible. I believe she could have really died in a car accident. It's a sad story.
It is sad,
but that does. I mean, he's still a very bad and corrupt person.
She did, but Joe Biden has also lied and told the story that the truck driver who killed them
was drunk when he wasn't. That's right.
He said so many things that are true.
The family of that truck driver has sued the Bidens to make him stop saying that, because and to this day, a lot of people say maybe someone else was drunk in that accident.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But the truck driver, from the forensic evidence, and at least when the case was reported, was not the one at fault. Now, accidents happen, and that's tragic. But because Joe Biden is such a corrupt, morally corrupt person,
to lie about something like that,
to become sympathetic. He went from having hairy legs to a drunk truck driver killed my wife and kid.
Yeah.
Because it makes him sympathetic.
Well, it's sad and horrible enough that happened.
Well, I was going to say, to lie about this. This was when he was getting out. He was sworn in. So he had 3 kids with his first wife. His daughter died, and then Beau and Hunter were both hospitalized. And there were images of him being sworn in for the first time in the hospital, because that's how close this was to inauguration. You mean to tell me you had the eyes of the nation on you? I'm sure this story was everywhere. And you think decades later you can just make stuff up? Like, you have such a low opinion of the American people.
It's like making, so many stories he's made up. I don't know if anyone's kept the full list, but arrested going to see Nelson Mandela.
Grew up in the black church. That's my favorite one. He grew up in the black church.
And the
not
synagogues.
a joke.
And the synagogues.
And the synagogues. He grew up in the black church and the synagogues. That's an impressive guy.
3 services every weekend. He went to Catholic Mass. He went to Friday services.
Oh my gosh, what a busy guy.
Yes.
And back in the 1950s, he and his father saw 2 gay men kiss, and his father said, "That's love, son." Yes, that definitely happened, Joe.
That happened.
This guy's been everywhere.
He brokered peace deals with Golda Meir when he was a law student. So you brokered peace
Wasn't he a coal
deals?
miner too?
With everything.
His family was coal miners. He stole that from a British politician.
He had to drop out because of the first presidential run he ever had, because he was like, I was first in my class at law school.
Yeah. His son died.
No.
Beau died in Iraq.
Yeah.
He's told that to Marines.
Yeah.
I lost my son in the war.
Wait, that's not what happened?
No,
he died after.
He died of familial shame.
Well, I think he was inhaling. I think there was something with the chemicals that were being burnt there.
They say he developed burn cancer, possibly because of the burn pits that he was exposed to while deployed. But he came back to the U.S. and then was an attorney general of Delaware. Like, he did not die in the Middle East.
I mean, it's still sad and horrible. So it's like, why embellish it? Why embellish a story like that? But
it's pathological. There's something wrong.
There's something wrong with the man. There really is something wrong with him.
He has hairy legs.
I got hairy legs. Well,
Again, we're with this caffeine
The
rage from all of
kids
us.
used to
I know.
rub lotion on my legs. Also a bad sign.
also a really bad
Don't
sign.
let strange kids rub lotion on
Don't
your
let
legs.
strange
Just
men. Don't let
good-
your kid rub lotion on a strange man's legs. But yeah, man, that's definitely a bit of a black pill here. We have another story here, which is I think telling of some of the victory of Republican strategy in getting the left to change course on their values, which is also always a fun thing to see them forced into. As asylum seekers in cities care tops 54,800, Mayor Adam announces new policy to help asylum seekers move from shelters. Now, this is the way the media frames this when you are on
This
their
is his
side.
office, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they want to protect you. If it was a Republican doing this in a red state, the story would be about how he was a horrible man who's forcing families out onto the streets. New York City Mayor Eric Adams today announced additional policies to help asylum seekers in the city's care move out of shelter and create critically needed space for arriving families with children seeking asylum. The city has made every effort to continue serving the more than 90,000 asylum seekers who have arrived in New York City since last spring, but with an average of 300 to 500 people still arriving each day and more than 54,000 migrants still in the city's care, New York City is at capacity, having responded in the absence of state or federal action. So, y'all probably know at this point that another part of Republican strategy recently, which has actually been very effective, has been Greg Abbott busing migrants up to these blue states. And what the blue states are saying is this is cruel, this is horrible, you can't use people as pawns, and we don't have the resources to sustain them. Yes, I agree with all of those things. Let's stop allowing that to happen at the southern border as well. Of course, as soon as they have to see the economic consequences, then it becomes a serious issue. I love when they admit that there's just not room or resources for everyone in the world who wants to come here. This is New York City. This is an incredibly wealthy part of the country. Everyone's trying to leave. These are the only people who seem to want to move to New York right now. And New York is saying, no, go away. We can't take care of you. Well, if New York can't afford to take care of these people, what about the impoverished border towns that are forced to? What do you guys think about this story?
Well, it's a great example of making them live out their values. And when your values all are welcome and we will accept, we're a sanctuary city, it is just a matter of numbers, right? The productive members of society produce the tax revenue, and then the government spends it. And when that becomes out of balance, and it's becoming out of balance, when you look at the exodus, and my whole family is still in New York City. I'm a proud New Yorker, although I live now on a farm in rural Virginia, as y'all know, and I talk about it all the time. But I mean, New York City will always be home, and we're 8th generation, 7th generation New Yorker. But when you look at the exodus of people who are leaving, like myself, it's the producers, it's the people, and that people are, they're trying to blame climate change, but they're going to Florida and Texas. I saw that recently.
Are they actually trying
I saw
to
that
blame
climate change is just.
Please tell me how they're doing.
That was an article.
Hold on,
that was an article today.
Here.
I have to find it. That was an article today about how climate change is driving a lot of the migration of communities, but they're all moving to Arizona, Texas, and Florida, and you're like, well, maybe they want more heat, I guess. So it's kind of comical that that's the accusation they're making. But the value, the producers, not to sound Ayn Randian, but the people who produce value, who produce in society, are the ones leaving, and the people who take, as crass as that sounds, migrants who come here with nothing, all they can do for a while is take. They need homes, they need shelter, they need food, they need health care. When that equation falls out of balance, you have Mayor Adams, who ran his whole campaign about how he was a welcoming mayor, all are welcome, all are welcome. It's a numbers game. Ayn Rand put it the coldest, maybe, but it is a numbers game, and New York is suffering that numbers game.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is part of why, what you just explained a moment ago about the fact that when people first come to the country, generally they are going to be taking more than they're able to give. This is why we had a system in place, why we do have a system, and why we're supposed to adhere to the system of sponsor families bringing people in, and then that family can help that person while they're in the country. It's not all being paid for by taxpayers, and then that person actually has an incentive to get out on their feet, because you don't want to be an adult or a person with a family living under someone else's roof, not contributing and not being able to get out of that situation because you haven't found a job. Like there's a structure in place to create the proper incentives for people who come here to start producing as soon as possible. Yeah. But in the United States, there are two fundamental positions when it comes to immigration. There's the position that we should have laws and the position that laws are mean. And those are literally the only two positions, by the way. Within position one, that we should have laws, there's a wide variety of different positions people have on what those laws should be. But the dominant view is it is mean to enforce those laws. How dare you suggest that they be respected?
Yeah, it comes down to emotions and rationale.
Yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately.
I think I have a family friend who's Greek descendant and tells the story about how Greek communities used to send someone over and they would it started with someone opening a retail business. I think it was a grocery store or candy store or something. And eventually they were able to then bring over someone else from the small town in Greece where they were from. And eventually that person was able to move farther out and start a store. And there was a community support element, so much so that she still attends a big family gathering. Now, they're not all related, but it's just sort of this community event of people who are descended from literally one town in Greece. That's so cool to me. And I find it interesting that we had systems that believed in support and mutual benefit, and instead our immigration policy has gotten so deranged that we are saying you should illegally cross the border because Eric Adams will say, yes, I will help you so you will elect me and I will look good. But actually when it comes time, when push comes to shove, he is now saying, suburbs of New York, Orange County, you guys need to house single migrant men in your hotels. And if you don't do so, you're the bad guys. How are you not
Somebody
doing
else's
this?
problem, not his.
I invited people up here. I don't think I can handle it anymore. So now it's your job to start cleaning up because New York dominates the state. New York City
throwing a
dominates
party
the
at
state.
someone else's house and then leaving.
Yeah,
Yes.
it doesn't make
Yes.
Or like being like, I have too many people coming to visit me, so they all are going to stay in your houses around me because I said so.
Or at least if you invite me to your house, I'm probably going to bring a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
You know, but sometimes the folks that we're inviting to this country bring nothing.
Right.
But then
Or
they
bring
want to
illegal
eat.
substances like fentanyl.
Or aren't invited. Like, sorry, that's part of it.
I
Not on the list.
I have a pretty radical environmental position, and I am a no immigrant position. I am not pro immigration. People say, "Well, we need immigrants. Diversity is our strength." I love that.
Then shouldn't New York want as many
I am just
of them as
flat out
possible?
like, why can we
No.
not be closed? Why
Yeah.
why do we need
So-
any immigrants? And the people tell me that they provide this tremendous value. I see them undercut wages. I see them as a drain on social systems, which I also oppose. I am a no immigration. I always say if I'm elected for president, there will be no immigration for like my administration.
Yeah.
The president after me can change that, but we're going to go 4 straight years with no immigration.
I think an immigration moratorium is a completely valid option because we are not just like, struggling with this. We are really in crisis. And that is not okay. I think this is, I mean, I've said it before. I think the open border puts the men and women and children who are trafficked across it in harm's way. It hurts the border communities. It hurts our country overall. I think it hurts people who try to apply legally to come here.
It does.
I think ultimately we do a disservice by allowing immigration. I would be for an immigration moratorium. But I can understand if you don't really read about anything and if you're not super political, you're not really into the news, and you just hear sob story after sob story about how actually the people who say this stuff are racist and actually they are harmful to everyone. You know, I could understand where you would be misled, and probably from a very sweet, nice place of compassion.
Yeah.
It's just not accurate.
I'm also married to an immigrant. I have to make that clear.
I'm a first
I wanna
generation
mention-
American.
Well, I want to mention
Australian,
this.
if that counts. But
I mean,
they're kind of American.
as far as a moratorium goes, I just like, it's not one of those things where I go, oh, that's bad, that's racist. I just haven't seen the numbers to know whether
Right,
that's
'cause we
necessary.
can't know
I
them.
think if a moratorium becomes necessary, absolutely. I don't know the stats. I do know that we have had an unprecedented and unsustainable number of people pouring across the border. I think in an ideal situation, a country should be able to welcome immigrants who are coming to try to make a better life for themselves.
Right.
But it's important for political leaders to do the hard work of maintaining the standard of living for the citizens who were born there and who live there, and not just allow anyone into the country when that is going to come at a tremendous burden for the population of that country.
There's a hospital near Dulles Airport called, I think it's Stone Springs, that friends of mine who live in that area used to tell me. They have a sign outside for the ER, 5-minute wait, 4-minute wait. But now we train or we fly multiple flights per day of illegals, and we drop them off, and the first thing they do
that's
is they
the
go to
thing.
the airport. And
Yeah.
now the local community
hospital?
says the ER, or the local hospital, excuse me, thank you. And now the local community says, well, now the ER has a 15, 18, 20, 25, and they're like, what's going on?
Something is
Well,
changing.
that's the result of unchecked immigration.
Well, exactly.
Hope you don't have diverticulitis or a heart attack because your services are now severely encumbered. Well, that's a reality.
Exactly.
That's not bad or good. It's bad, but it's reality.
Well, okay, and so
it's bad.
There was one time, I think, where you could have the left, if they were remotely consistent or cared about the things they claim to care about. You could even have the left making an argument for a moratorium, and that was during COVID. People weren't allowed to go to work. People weren't able to visit their loved ones in the hospital while they were dying. People weren't able to go to the funerals of loved ones because this disease was just too dangerous and everyone was going to die if it was allowed to spread. But we were just letting people into the country. It's like, that's absolutely insane. People don't have the freedom to go from their house to their job, and you're saying people have the freedom to come from anywhere in the world into our country when this is the time of a pandemic? I mean, I'm not asking for a moratorium. I'm just asking for laws to be followed. This is crazy that we're even having this debate. What the discussion should be about is, what are the immigration laws? Instead, our discussion is, should we follow them? Should we enforce the immigration laws we have? That's totally insane.
We didn't even force vaccines on the illegals.
No. We didn't.
Right?
If you migrated legally, you had to take the COVID vaccine. But if you crossed the border illegally, you did not have to. This is craziness. Yeah. And again, it only punishes people who try to operate in a respectful way to our laws, which I find to be abhorrent. Like, why are we allowing this? And I just think, the fact is, you can't have a logical conversation about immigration because people feel uncomfortable talking about implications of race or diversity or whatever else. And that's fine. You try to do it in a respectful way. But if you bear out the numbers, like one of the examples I was reading recently is that tech job salaries have been stagnant for a long time. And part of that is because we actually have an oversupply of workers because of H-1B visas. If we didn't have that, we would have an industry that becomes competitive again. I find it interesting that people can't bear out that, like, immigration has consequences for the population. And sometimes we have to say no. And it's not out of hatred. It's just out of protection for
It's out of love.
America.
Well, everything else
out of love.
You immediately, like the basic human goodness and decency wants to be able to say, like what Seamus was saying, like, yes, we would like people to be able to come to this country like everyone did originally. And if you don't do it the right way, though, we can't possibly be able to say, okay, well, how do we make that work? Because we don't have like the numbers and the balance sheet to make everything make sense. And if we have like, we have to have numbers and stuff on that.
And no one knows those numbers.
Right.
They're all made up.
And so this is a point that I made years ago. I remember I was out to dinner with a group of friends, probably about 8 years ago now. And this was when a shooting had happened in Paris. There was a radical theocratic Islamic extremist.
Was that the Charlie Hebdo?
It may have been. I think it may have been. I can't remember the particulars of the situation, but I remember we were out to dinner. I got the news notification. I looked at the article and I went, oh my goodness, this is horrible. And a girl that I was out to dinner with my friends, who I hadn't met before, she said, you're only upset about it because it's happening in the first world. And I said, horrible things like this happen in the third world all the time. And when they start happening in the first world, which is anomalous in the sense that it is the first time in history we have had this much wealth, this much peace, this much strength in terms of law and order, at least in certain countries we did. And when we chip away at that, it doesn't make the third world better. It just means there are now fewer places in the world where people aren't being killed by these rogue theocrats. And so what leftists will do is they'll say, okay, well, your country is very wealthy and you're upset about these bad things happening in your country, but you're not concerned about what's happening in the migrants' country or why they need to come here. Okay, but here's the point. If the way of life that we have here is eliminated, it's not going to come back. It's very likely that it won't come back for a very, very long time. And it's not going to make life better for the people in these countries that they're trying to escape. There's just going to be nowhere left to run to.
You brought up a great point, and I agree with everything you say. I'm just I'm impressed at your kindness, because my answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
Like, I am concerned it's happening in...
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
that's what I said.
Well,
I said yes, I'm concerned. Yes.
Who's concerned about my country, right? If you say you have to be concerned about what's happening in Rwanda, okay, well, Rwandans are worried about that, and now we're worried about that. Who's responsible for worrying about what happens in America?
Yep.
Right?
Nobody.
So if someone has... I love how leftists just can make accusations like that. You're only concerned because it's happening in your country. Damn straight!
Yeah, well, it's like,
right?
yes.
I live here.
Yeah,
I really like it here.
No, you're only concerned that your mom has cancer because she's your her mom. It's
Right.
like,
Yes, exactly.
No, but this girl that you were at dinner with, I bet she said that.
No,
to
hold
you.
on. It was a group of us. I was not like on a date with this girl. Okay, I just want to be clear.
Seamus has never been on a date on his life.
Not once, not a single time. I want you all to know. Not with that kind of woman.
Okay.
I know girls who would date you very gladly.
No, I'm
to know.
honest again, not liberal. But here's the thing:
It's
if
a
they're
love
liberal
show.
women,
I love this. No, stop talking. I'm done with
This
the
is-
news.
this is,
Who do you know?
this
Who are
is
we
Love
setting him
Doctor
up
with Seamus Coughlin.
Okay. But what I'm going to say is, this girl who you were at dinner in a group with turned to you and said this because she feels as though she has to knock you out of bed. Do you think this girl thinks about the third world ever, except for when it comes to you? No.
Except for
ask her one news update. Ask her to cite.
I should have told her to finish her dinner because they're starving kids in Africa or something like that. Hold the mom line out on her.
Ask her to name one outlet in a third world country. Ask her to name one news source, one journalist, one political leader. She could not do it. She only said it to make you feel bad.
Yeah.
Which is disgusting.
Well, fortunately, it didn't work.
No, it
didn't work, and I don't think she was expecting.
And there wasn't
the
a second
response
date.
that
I
she
mean,
got.
there wasn't a second
no
group
second
dinner.
We were
date.
literally out for a friend's birthday, and it was one of her. It was one of her friends. It was an interesting conversation. Anyway, so the left.
I'm so
the
excited
left
you're
has a
gonna
law
set
and
Seamus up
order.
with
The
someone.
left has a law and order problem, and they have a law and order problem when it comes to people entering the country illegally, when it comes to people committing violent crime, when it comes to groups that they consider to be marginalized or oppressed. But then they become proponents of ruling with an iron fist whenever it comes time to prosecute somebody on the right or who has done something that the left views as a threat to their power. So a judge has denied a bid by Q Shaman to toss out his January 6th conviction. A federal judge Thursday denied a bid by January 6th rioter Jacob Chansley, better known as the Q Shaman. They're calling him QAnon Shaman. It's Q Shaman, okay? To vacate.
Why would you know that though?
To vacate his conviction in light of footage now, incoming investigation. You know, I'm done for now. HC.
Sorry.
To vacate his conviction in light of footage from the Capitol that day aired by ex-Fox News host Tucker Carlson. Chansley, who stood out from the January 6th crowd for wearing face paint and a horned headdress, I actually thought he fit in pretty well. I don't know if he stood out that much during the riot, pleaded guilty to obstruction and was sentenced in November 2021 to 41 months. Now, this is something I want to mention. I was obviously being a little tongue-in-cheek there. What happened on J6 was on one side of the building, you did have people who broke through the window and broke in. On the other side of the building, the police literally opened the doors and let people in. So you had just a lot of regular people who were there as protesters who were walking through and were catching charges because of it. It's crazy. There was actually a judge who had to let somebody off because the footage that they had of the event proved that he basically went and spoke to a police officer and he wasn't told that he couldn't leave. In order to charge someone with trespassing, they can't think that they're allowed to be there. But of course, we know that the left, they don't care about law and order at all, and that goes in two directions. That goes in the direction of not prosecuting people who are breaking the law, and of course prosecuting people who didn't break the law, and refusing to exonerate someone even when footage comes out showing that they were not guilty of the crime of which they were accused. Now, that said, in this particular story, I can't give you all the intricacies and details. It's possible that they still had something on him. But overall, with the pattern that I've seen with these hearings, they're all too willing to be as harsh as possible on people who really either have a very good excuse or actually didn't break the law at all. And there are some people who were genuinely violent who should be locked up. There's no question about that. But again, we don't see any of the people who broke down the barricades at the White House being arrested. There was not an investigation into the 2020 riots, despite a majority of the American population wanting investigations. According to polling data, far more people than wanted investigations into January 6th, because the J6 investigations were not about protecting the American people or our democracy. They were about protecting people in power and having you ignore the fact that cities were literally set on fire and allowed to burn for several months at a time.
Well, it is a crime to withhold exculpatory evidence, and that's what the
fair
J6
enough.
committee
that's true.
did. And if that had been extended to other famous cases, you think of Hands Up, Don't Shoot. You think of Kyle Rittenhouse, right? When evidence comes out, different angles, different cameras, different footage, and you get to paint the whole picture, it somehow changes the verdict a little bit because the jury sees everything. There was no jury, obviously, in the J6 trial, but the fact that they withheld all of this, and obviously this footage wasn't brought into Jacob Chansley's, it's shameful for the judge, right?
Yep.
And it's shameful for Benny Thomas and the entire J6 committee and all the people who partook of it. That's why the Republicans turned so much on Liz Cheney, why they turned so much on Matt and Kinzinger, not because they were part of J6, but because they knew that they were withholding evidence like this. They knew that they were withholding crucial pieces of data to tell the full story, and wanted to at Trump.
Yep.
And that's an unforgivable crime.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. This is a complete perversion of justice. I do remember reading that story. Now that you mention it, that evidence was actually withheld. I mean, again, these people care nothing for rule of law. They don't care about the process. They care about the outcome. That's
the evidence that Tucker showed of the Capitol Police walking Jacob.
I saw that.
Walking him up the stairs. The door was locked. They found another door. They opened up the door. They walked him to the floor of the Capitol.
Gave him a back rub, brought him hot cocoa.
Yeah, he gave his prayer. Thank you, Lord God Almighty, for the United States Senate. Thank you for the Capitol Police who are keeping us safe. And then they walked him out and he went home.
Yep.
So again, people could say, well, he still broke the law by being there, but that really changes things a little bit from the narrative that they showed at J6.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that somebody is a trespasser when police officers literally walk them through the building and tell them that they can be there. I mean,
you would have thought if he was doing something illegal, they would have perhaps been the one to notice it.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy. I know that's a crazy expectation.
The police were in on the insurrection.
But why aren't they getting brought up on charges then?
Well, because if that evidence had been
story-
showed, who were those cops? Those cops now have to testify. Why did you walk Jacob Chansley? And did you get an order? How did you think?
And we already made the Capitol Police the heroes of this story, right?
Yep.
I mean, so
unravels.
I was I got the chance to sit in on opening when we did opening statements for the Proud Boys trial. This group of guys that were selected by the U.S. government to represent the masterminds of the conspiracy, right? Because there were a couple people who they like swapped in and out at the last minute. It was crazy. But one of the things that I remember the most, and I wrote about it for Timcast News, if you want to find that article, is
good job, HT.
Thanks. Was that the U.S. government went first, and it was like, here is a clip of text messages they're having, or here is a video, or here is a voice memo, and then each man was represented by their own attorney. So there were a lot of attorneys. They had lots to say, but most of the time they just expanded it. Instead of taking one tiny clip like the U.S. government, they were like, here is the context of what they're saying. And it was very difficult to believe. One of the attorneys there said it best. These men couldn't organize ordering as a group from McDonald's. You think they organized a conspiracy? But the fact of the matter is, the U.S. government, really the American media, needs someone to take the fall. They need to have whipped the people into a frenzy, and they cannot say that there was no one at fault here.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is disturbing, right? Because we are not carrying out justice for the people. We are carrying out justice for these corporations and the administrative bloat that says we did the right thing and we will prove it to you with our own tools.
Well, even the whole narrative surrounding January 6th and the idea that it's an insurrection is so unbelievably ridiculous. These people were grasping at any straw they can possibly grab at to try to indict and criminalize Donald Trump, or prosecute Donald Trump, make him out to seem as if he was trying to subvert our democratic process, when in reality they were doing that with this fraudulent, nonsensical investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election and his collaboration with them. When you actually look at the narrative, what they're effectively saying is that Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, the most powerful person on the planet, with all of the resources available to the executive branch at his fingertips, wanted to overturn a fair and free election, and his genius plan to do so was by dog whistling to a bunch of boomers to go inside of the Capitol and not do anything violent.
Yeah.
What?
Was a great plan.
He literally, an incredible plan. He literally said, go have your voices heard. He didn't tell them to be violent. He told them to be nonviolent. He told them to go protest.
Yeah.
Not break in, but even so, if he had some kind of secret dog whistle that only the other conservatives could hear, and that's why they went in there, it seems like a pretty lame thing to dog whistle when you're trying to overthrow the United States government, to get a group of people. I mean, it really was a mostly peaceful insurrection. It was the only person who was harmed. The only person who was harmed was one of the protesters, poor Ashley Babbitt. That woman was killed. That woman was killed. If someone was killed at a BLM protest, they would be a martyr for the country. I'm not kidding. We would have statues of them. We would have statues of them. The police officer who shot them would be locked up. We would melt the key down and then pour the metals it was made of down the drain.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. So I'm desperately digging in my backpack because I have a relevant note.
Looking for a point. Looking for a point to make.
Well, someone told me that there was another protester at January 6th who had a heart attack and then later died.
I heard about that,
but we don't hear his name. So I'm just trying to see if I can pull it from my notes. No one quote me on this.
Well, but I mean, I'll give you a second to find those. But this is something we always saw. Listen,
I think that person was still on the mall. Actually,
yeah.
If my facts are right, I think that person didn't even make it to the Capitol, and I think they were older. I think they were.
I have Kevin Greeley as a name. Nobody quote me on this.
Nope.
Media. I'm just looking back at my notes.
The media.
But it is interesting because people did suffer because of these riots. And the representation is that they were all armed and dangerous and crazy. And Donald Trump sent them there. And meanwhile, the video showed these supposed leaders saying, no one go in. Don't go in there. Like, this is the worst insurrection ever. If the leaders who apparently conspired to do this are telling you not to go in there.
Yeah, it's a really bad idea. It's a really bad insurrection.
I just don't understand. And especially because we did not see the same kind of vicious pursuit of people who really did burn businesses in the summer of 2020. How can you say that this is worth spending? I'm going to go back to our first story. Millions of dollars investigating, right? How come we don't have a system of justice that represents people outside of Washington? If you were an American voter and you had a business that burned in Minneapolis or in any major city, and you know that they just said, well, we're going to let them go. They didn't feel heard and it's okay. But because it happened to us, the federal government, we are going to use the full weight of our purse strings to go after these people.
It's so crazy how fast it shifted focus from like everything else they were going after Trump for, and then all of a sudden, like, I was watching it live, and I'm like, okay, so now this has happened. Everything else was forgotten about, essentially. Yeah. And the main focus and a show trial on this for the next however many years.
Yeah.
And all for what? Like, it's crazy.
Absolutely. Well, one thing old HC over there mentioned that I want to touch on was that there were people who passed there, and what ended up happening is there were people who didn't die at January 6th, but died later.
Yeah.
And then it was like COVID-19 where we just said they died with January 6th.
Yeah.
And it was like because of January 6th that they died, even though they died a significant amount of time later. I mean, what a ridiculous way of measuring the mortality of an event. Did we do that for the BLM riots, by the way? Did we consider any of the people who committed suicide or died because their business was burnt down? Did we keep track of whether that happened to add to that death count? No, of course not. Because they were grasping at straws to make it into something that it wasn't.
Kevin Greason is the name I was looking for.
Okay.
No, I think that you're totally right.
Thank you.
I think it was, and I remember this feeling. So the night of all of this, I was actually working on like an old house that I was flipping, and I remember I have such a vivid memory of listening to this on my phone and like throughout that day because I was new to hanging drywall, and I was doing the thing where you like put up the joint compound on the tape and you have to scrape it off, and I'm not great at it. But I remember listening to this and just thinking like the hysterics that went on in Congress afterwards, thinking like, you guys didn't care when this happened to your constituents. No. You did not care when this happened to listeners. It's not that, any riot is necessarily okay. It's just that there's no equity in the justice here. There's no belief that because it happened somewhere else, it's just as valuable as when it happens in DC.
And the hysterics have to have a consequence, because if you're a member of Congress and your currency is politics, then words have to have objective value and truth. And so when you have people like Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, who I know is an easy punching bag, and I hate to pile on, but when she says to Ted Cruz, like, you almost had me killed on January 6th, then you find out, wait, like a cop showed up to your office and said, hey, are you okay?
Hours
and
before.
Your office is and if anyone's been to the Capitol grounds, and I used to work on Capitol Hill, your office is nowhere near it's the Capitol complex, but it's far. You can't even hear the January 6th riots from her office. And you say, well, there's a value that there has to be a consequence. I don't know if it's censure. I don't know if it's what, but when you foment hysteria and you pile on and you say, I was almost killed on January 6th, and you say, well, you're only doing that to throw fuel to the fire, and that's dangerous. But our politicians do this all the time.
Well, again, when Trump and his family, when the literal president of the United States and his family were forced into the presidential bunker, that was hilarious. Everyone was joking about that. Who cared? It was actually really the only condemnation we got was the condemnation of Trump for actually clearing the protesters away and then going to the historic St. John's Church and having pictures taken. Everyone freaked out about that. How could he do that?
He's holding the Bible.
He's holding the Bible.
Wrong.
He's holding the Bible as if rule of law is compatible with Christianity.
I'm loving the head shaking.
That's what they do. They go, all right.
They do what, Seamus?
That's what you heard. I'm not doing it on camera, Hannah Claire. I'm good at avoiding it.
No, do it.
I can't do it.
Hannah Claire, you need to stop derailing right now.
What?
I don't know what
Or let's get a really good segue.
Quiet. Next story today. Speaking of segues, here's my next segue into my next story.
Don't tell the girls you're going to set them up with about his segues.
They'll love the segues. Are you kidding me? Someone needs to make a super cut of my segues. They're all really good.
Just asking for attention on the internet. Don't tell the girls about that either.
Listen, I don't have to ask for it. I get it. Louisiana lawmakers overturned governor's veto on gender-affirming care ban for transgender minors. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you all know how I feel about this exact kind of framing. Gender-affirming care ban, firstly, it's child mutilation, okay?
It's also ABC News.
It's ABC News. No, I don't expect anything better, but sometimes it's fun to read these articles so that we can not only give people the truth, but show them how the media lies. And an exercise of sorting through the nonsense.
Right, and no one can claim that we only use one side because
that's right.
This is your bizarre article.
That's right. Put that in my dating profile, Hannah Claire. Baton Rouge, Louisiana's Republican-dominated legislature overturned Democratic government John Bel Edwards' recent veto of a ban on gender-affirming care for transgender minors on Tuesday. Louisiana, where the ban is scheduled to go into effect on January 1st, 2024, will join 20 other states that have enacted laws restricting or banning gender-affirming care, which includes puberty blockers, hormone treatment, and gender reassignment surgery. So hold on a second. Includes gender reassignment surgery? I thought that never happens to minors ever. It's crazy. Most of those states face now lawsuits, and that's just not good writing. I would right now face lawsuits, but am I wrong here?
Most of those states face now lawsuits.
It's a typo.
Yeah, that's just now. ABC, you should be ashamed.
I mean, I guess
and in some places,
like that, but you shouldn't.
The bans have been temporarily blocked by federal judges. How do you guys feel about this? This overturning of this legislation? I mean, it's sick. The media comes to their defense. They call it care. One article I saw about this, and I see this periodically whenever Republicans do literally the only sane thing you possibly can do and say don't mutilate children is Republicans are trying to restrict transgender youth from receiving health care, as if the Republicans are going, you want your kidney removed and replaced, but you're transgender. Like, no, they're saying you can't mutilate a kid because that's not actually healthcare.
Yeah. I would love to ask John Bel Edwards, the governor who tried to overturn this, who vetoed this law, and I'm glad he was overturned. I just have a quick question. Since you are not up for re-election, actually the gubernatorial race is happening already in Louisiana. He's served his 2 terms. John Bel Edwards has been fairly conservative Democrat, but now is he auditioning for a role hoping that Biden wins re-election? Does he want to be a cabinet secretary? Is he auditioning for ambassadorship somewhere? I mean, he's clearly looking for his next gig, and he says, well, heck, I'm a Democrat. I have to start doing Democrat things, because if you ask the people of Louisiana, I think their legislators represent them. Louisiana is a fairly conservative state, very red state. America is a fairly conservative country.
That's right.
And no one supports this. And so I'm just curious that John Bel Edwards would veto this. I just wonder what he hopes. What role is he auditioning for? Probably Secretary of Energy. You know, I mean, he's from a big oil and gas state. I assume Jennifer Granholm, one of the dumbest members of the cabinet, and that's a really low bar. Have you met Pete Buttigieg? So I assume he's trying to audition for a cabinet role, and he was like, maybe if I support the trans agenda, Biden will give me a job. So shame on John Bel Edwards, but unsurprising. At the end of the day, a Democrat's gonna Democrat.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially important to point out that he is out of time in his state government. Like, he's already been the governor. Unless he's going to try and run for Senate, which I don't think he could get elected from Louisiana. There's nowhere for him to go except to join the Biden administration if there is a second term of the Biden administration. You know, I love these stories because I like to see our laws at work, right? Like, it is interesting that Louisiana's lawmakers said, no, we don't want this. And he was like, I'm going to do it anyways. And you're like, no, you're not. And I think that must be a real victory for the residents of Louisiana who voted for their state leaders to come up and be brave, because it is not an issue, even in red states, that people typically want to talk about, that feel comfortable rejecting, because again, the language around it is so much like you are voting against giving trans children orthodontia or
until you
like
read the second
healthcare.
paragraph and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
What is this?
Exactly. And I think that's like the strangest thing, which if I were to say to you, conservatives voted to protect at-risk youths from undergoing unnecessary medical procedures, you'd be like, oh, wow, cool. That seems like it could be good.
Mentally unstable youth from permanently scarring. Yeah.
Right. Vulnerable populations, which you tell us over and over and over again are subject to all kinds of mental health risks that other people are not, should not be experimented on. If I told you that, you would agree with me. But if as soon as I tell you I'm a conservative and I'm against letting minors undergo hormone and surgery, then you're against it. That's bizarre.
That's bizarre. I have a question. I got a question for you. Remember how you just said you died with COVID, you died of COVID, and they assumed everyone with COVID, and you died with January 6th and died of January 6th? Since all the data shows that minors who have this mutilation done to themselves, their suicide rate goes up.
Yep.
Should they be considered died of trans surgery or died with trans surgery?
Yeah, it's true. So I've looked there. There's a bunch of different. Died for, man. Yep. There's a bunch of different studies that I've seen on this, and some of them will claim that when you do these interventions, you actually see a decrease in suicide rate. I've looked into those studies. The ones that I've seen are pretty nonsensical. There's a study that I won't even get into pulling. Well, maybe I will. So there was a survey done in 2015 of like 27,000 transgender people, but the way it was done was by reaching out to advocacy groups and then having those groups find people to answer these questions.
So Rachel Levine was interviewed and
casting calls.
So basically what ended up happening was this data was parsed through by Jack Turbin of Stanford University, and they released this they released this study based on this data just, I think, a year or two ago. And they said, look, this study proves that health outcomes and life outcomes get better for people, because what we actually were able to do with this study was measure trans youth who got health care. And I hate the term trans youth. That's
I just say transgender
transgender identifying. Yeah. And we saw the ones who could get the hormones and puberty blockers, and those who couldn't. Well, and we found the life outcomes were better for the people who were able to get these puberty blockers. Well, there's several issues with that, which is firstly, one of the reasons a person won't qualify for these treatments is because they have significant mental health issues to the point where that doctor doesn't feel comfortable giving it to them. So in the group of people who weren't able to receive the treatment, you would already expect for there to be worse mental health outcomes, and none of that was normed for. And also what the study did is they took men taking estrogen and women taking testosterone and lumped their results together as if that's the same kind of treatment. So what they did end up finding was that one of those groups had their suicide rate go up after they started taking hormones and the other didn't, but then they just squished it all together to hide that and make it seem like taking those hormones is better for you. There's also a bunch of other issues with that survey. There's a bunch of other issues with the other studies they claim. There have been, I think, the most credible and reliable studies that have come out about this. And again, I'm not basing this on liking the results, but I'm talking about studies that have looked through actual medical data in Nordic Europe, have found that there's actually an increased suicide rate once you get far enough out from the surgery. About 10 years, you see a massive spike. This stuff isn't good for people. Even the studies that purport to show that suicide rate or life goes down or life outcomes increase will show it occurring to a very marginal degree that doesn't even put that person in line with the rest of the population. So you end up engaging in this mutilation for a very slight, even negligible benefit. But again, that's a slight or negligible benefit within a year or two, often based on small sample sizes and poorly collected data that doesn't go all the way out to that 10-year mark where more credible studies have shown the suicide rate really increases.
It's very hard also to survey people who committed suicide.
Yeah.
They're notoriously not responsive.
And that's why, there was a study out of a study out of Sweden that went over hundreds and hundreds of different people's medical histories, and they compared people who had been diagnosed with dysphoria, who received treatment for, dysphoria, or in other words, I shouldn't say treatment for dysphoria, who had these mutilating interventions, those who didn't, and then the general population. And what they found out just by looking at those medical records was that hospitalizations for suicide doubled among the people who had received the intervention. So we're going to go to Super Chats now. So I want you all to smash that like button and share this video. If you enjoyed it, join us at timcast.com. Join as a member to watch the live show where viewers will be calling in and speaking to us live. It's also uncensored, so we get to say all of the things that we want to say here, but don't get to because of YouTube. I'm not your buddy,
That's
guy.
why Carter's so
I've been
quiet.
holding in words all day, and I can't wait to just let them all out.
Let them all out.
You have to come to the after show now.
Carter's going to get wild.
I'm going to get wild.
I'm not your buddy guy says, now more than ever, we need to lock shields with Trump. We cannot allow corrupt, evil, deceptive traitors dictate who can or cannot be elected. Also, yes, there are many traitors who are aiding in the West's controlled demolition. Ooh, spicy. Agreed. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Okay,
I agree.
Cool. Raymond G. Stanley Jr. says, Seamus, did you see Mary's interview with Knowles? How dare she? Yeah, I did. And I didn't see the whole thing. Why would I watch all of that? But I saw a clip of it. I saw the moment where she smeared me, and it was unbelievable.
I got to see that.
You really don't. You really don't. I would advise people not watch it. It was behind the paywall, and that they have. You want to see the Timcast conversation behind the paywall. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
I think his audience was disappointed that she was there instead of me. And may I
think that's
say,
how she opened.
Ian's, that is how she opened, and then they lobbed some completely unfounded accusations at me.
You watched the whole thing?
No. How could I sit through that? People sent me clips. They said, look at these horrible smears. And may I say, Ian's transition of my SC to ask about pardoning everyone was masterful. Vivek didn't let down with the answer. Wonderful.
Ian had some fun transitions. My favorite was he was talking, I can't even remember now. And then all of a sudden he goes, how do you feel about colonizing Mars?
Yes.
And I just thought, there is no one like Ian Crossland.
That's not coming at all.
Let's check
And
this out.
to his credit, Vivek just roll with it.
Vivek did a great job. I thought it was a great interview with him.
Yeah.
Satasha Catergator, oh boy. She said, finally, I have a chance to tune in to Timcast this week. While I made a public apology to Seamus for accusing him of stealing spoons, Michael Knowles convinced me this morning that Seamus is at least stealing something. Yeah, apparently a lot of free rent out of your head.
That's a good one.
Thank you. It's unbelievable. All these criticisms, all these attacks. I'm sick of it. I'm exhausted.
He has such an evil villain energy right now. I wish you could see it. He's like, they're making me stronger with their accusations.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't. You guys know me. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do something like this. I wouldn't take Tim's spoons. You know me. I wouldn't do that.
I haven't seen any spoons around here, though.
Yeah.
Then where would I have put them if I took them?
Oh my gosh, are you the leak, Carter? Because I will freak out.
I have 2 forks in my studio. But no
so you're not
spoons.
weighing into this debate at all? Other
Not
than
yet.
to say there are no spoons in our office.
Well, I'm kind of insinuating that maybe he took them, but I don't have any proof.
Okay.
I wouldn't do that. One evil chef said, I would like to take a libertarian stance in today's culture. Drop the drinking age to 18. You should be young, dumb, and learn your lessons. Raise the voting age to 38. You shouldn't control lives until you learn /survive 18. Look, I'm certainly not opposed to raising the voting age. This is an interesting thing. People will talk about the fact that in Europe, the drinking age is much lower. I think in a functional country, you can and do have a lower drinking age. You're an adult at 18, you should be able to drink. However, we don't raise virtuous adults who can handle anything, let alone their liquor today.
Right.
So I kind of understand why it's at 21.
Well, and I think our 18-year-old limit is weird. Like a lot of
It's forced
European
onto the
countries have a
states.
graduated system. So you could drink beer when you're younger, right? Like you're with parents, you can drink at home, things like that. And I think that encourages a culture that has alcohol be a part of it, and you learn to drink in a calm way. You learn to drink, at meals, socially. I always reference this, but there was a group of university presidents who, led by the president of Dartmouth University, I believe, who said, we want to lower the drinking age to 18 because we want people to not come to college campuses and start binge drinking.
That's a good point.
Because- Right.
'Cause I showed up to college and I was already a pro.
Really?
Yeah. So I didn't.
Why? Did you get coached at home, or you just had a lot
Well,
of
I just drank a lot in high school.
Yeah, same, and responsibly also. But
Right.
I've been from an
Well,
Irish Catholic family in
not
New
so
York
much,
City.
but-
We drank
Carter's parents are so mad right now.
I would be in favor of no drinking age whatsoever. But if we're going to talk about changing ages, everything has to be consistent. So I would raise the voting age to 21 because I do not feel like you should be able to vote, which is the most full expression of participation in a republic, about people who cannot partake in that republic. So when you have 18-year-olds telling 21-year-olds you can't have a beer, but you have 18-year-olds sending them to war, right? I have a problem with that. So if I am old enough to vote, I'm old enough to do everything in that functional republic, and if I'm not able to do some of it, then I can't vote in it.
Right. Interesting. See, I disagree. I think that there's good reason to say, like, all right, you're an adult, but you still can't vote, just because historically you couldn't vote till you were 21, but people were basically on their own providing for themselves from the time they were 16. So you had a couple years under your belt of like learning about what the world was before you were able to, you'd paid rent before or built a house, lived on land.
That's universally true. There are a lot of people who save their families for a long time.
Did you just not all me? Did you just hashtag not all?
I not all
Did you
to
point
your
out?
face.
Yes, of course. I'm speaking in generalities.
Grimcast,
do you
am I
want
right?
me? Do you want me to highlight every individual case of every single person who's ever voted so that I can parse through?
You're saying generally people were on their own at 16, and I don't think that's general true. Although some
you were
people
expected to be able to provide for yourself by that point in time.
So this, I think, what you're talking about is responsibility.
Yes,
so
and we don't raise people to be responsible.
Serge coming in to break up this fight.
Well, I was going to say with Hannah Claire's point, some different. I'm losing the word right now. Cultures.
Yeah.
Like some, like men will live with their families until they get married.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like until they're like 30 something.
Like Italians.
Yeah.
Yeah. And mom still does my laundry and absolutely.
Mamma mia.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to quickly finish my point though. I was going to say that I think the responsibility is hugely important. I think that's what everyone's talking about here. Where if you boil it down, you're talking about responsibility to say like, oh, well, yeah, alcohol does this to me and I can restrain myself from drinking too much of it. And that just didn't happen. I went to high school in Singapore and the drinking age is 18 there. And, I like at some point when all the seniors in high school are turning 18, you're able to drink and you're still going to school. You're still expected to be able to control yourself and handle yourself. And like you said, when you came to school in Texas, right?
Yeah.
People, binge drink like crazy, and it's wild to see that. When I showed up in college, and I was like, wow, these people are they're like just unhinged. It's just wild, the culture here. But anyways,
Serge, is it just me, or is there no right way to pronounce this next name? I don't. It's not like inappropriate or anything. I just how do we
trust you.
I mean,
Legamithigayan?
Yeah,
I think that's what we're going with.
Sounds good.
Biden claiming to grow up in a black church is the... I can't even read that without laughing. I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't laugh because you know what he said? He said, not a joke.
Not a joke.
Biden, as if also, Biden claiming to grow up in a black church is like the real life version of Steve Martin's character recounting his life in the movie The Jerk when he said, I was a small black child. He's a classical dishonest lawyer from an era when you couldn't be fact checked. Yeah, here's the thing, man. Now that Elon's in charge, he can be fact checked because even in the technological era, they weren't doing it to him. They weren't fact checking old Sleepy Joe, but he has so many different identities. I'm not one to diagnose from afar with anything other than dementia, but I gotta say, I'm getting like tinges of BPD over here with this guy. He feels like he's just a different person in every room. Of course, I'm being facetious here. We know that this is not a medical condition. This is just being a politician. These people will adopt whatever identity helps them in any given instance. He just happens to be like particularly
He's really good at it.
Yeah, he is. He'll become a different guy.
But it was easier.
Make a career out of it.
Right. It was easier to be that in 1970 when there wasn't an internet, but now there is, and he still does it. He's Walter Mitty.
But now he can't help it.
Now he's kind of lost his mind.
Now he doesn't really know.
I grew up in the Jewish community. I grew up in the black community. I grew up in the Puerto Rican community. Name a community. He's grown up in it.
It's just all of the communities. Yeah. He was like, there was like a big Venn diagram of communities, and he was like just in that dot right in the middle.
You didn't know Scranton was the most diverse place in all of America in 1950.
That's true.
Most people think it was all white coal miners, but actually it was not. It was the most diverse microcosm of all America in 1950.
What are the different churches he said he was in?
He's been in definitely Puerto Rican community, black church, Jewish synagogue. He went to mass every Sunday.
He's a very busy guy.
I'm sure when he was in India, he told them, I grew up in going to Sikh and Buddhist temples, and no joke.
No
joke.
Because I grew up in the Indian church, not a joke. All right, so we have Cashby saying, it is heartening to see strong Americans making a difference. Bud Light, sound of freedom. Try that in a small town. Let's keep pushing that freedom economy.
Yeah.
Businesses that are, I'm reading a guest super chat. This is their hard-earned money. You just have to, businesses that are hiring, given our AI-powered applicant tracking system, a look, eye emoji, res genie.
Yeah.
Eye emoji.
I was just going to
so they
say
drew
also
eye emojis.
your friend who you went out to support in
To
Nebraska.
emphasize the word look.
I feel like that's a good sign too, right?
It
There
is.
are all sorts of cool things happening in American culture.
It
And we
is.
shouldn't be too cynical about them. We also should not take them for granted.
Right.
Trevor, good job, buddy. So proud of that kid.
And he just like
Kid,
DM'd you on
grown man.
Twitter.
Yeah, DM'd me on Twitter and said, "Could you help us out with this?" And I would do it again. I mean, this is happening, and I'm sure I won't put anyone on the spot, but I'm sure other people in these situations would. You know, my school board, I know people do this. I know people involved in the trans stuff in the school level, and they say, my school board's pushing this. Can you help us with our school board vote? Can you help us with that? And they show up because this is what we do. So I love it.
That's awesome.
Seamus is laughing.
No, sorry, some super chats. There's just these rascals in chat. You know, these
Are they accusing you of something?
Absolutely not. No, they know it's good for them. X, Y, and Z said medically assisted self-harm. That is a great way of putting it. That's a great way of putting it.
Oof, that is.
Yeah, MASH. We'll start calling it MASH, medically assisted self-harm.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a good acronym.
So
Halfway
thank
to
you.
Canada.
Yeah.
I've got kind of a brain for acronyms.
Come on,
so it's like,
come on.
Was that TMI?
X, Y, and Z. I give it up to you. Don't let Seamus steal your thunder. It's okay.
Well, he didn't say that. I was the one who came up with the acronym for. I was the one who noticed what the first letter of every word was.
Okay.
That takes
All
something
right.
of a genius, right?
Yeah, they capitalized it, but okay, we'll give it to you.
Serge is really moderating tonight.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not sure what to make of this.
Keep it in check.
I think I could maybe work most of that into an article. There is an obligation with language to like when we're writing to like not give in to the left bias, right? The gender affirming care, but also not lean so far verbose that you're also just leaning into a different
Right.
echo chamber. So it's definitely an interesting suggestion. I tend to say, and it's really awkward, medical gender related intervention services or something like that. And the thing is, it makes these types of articles very difficult. It doesn't feel like my best writing because it's the most awkward phrasing of all time.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
But philosophy of language, we were talking about this before the show started. That's why the left dominates the language conversation. Wittgenstein would have a field day if he were alive. And what did he say? If I can control your language, I can control your reality.
Yeah.
And that's why they jump onto gender affirming. They jump onto choice. They jump onto queer. They jump onto gay. They take words and they
To
redefine
surgery.
them. Top surgery.
Gender affirming care. It's actually called
surgery.
MASH.
Yeah.
I just feel like you have to not give in.
That's right. TN says, does Chicago gifts for immigrants include AK-47s? Oh man, honestly, it wouldn't be all that shocking. I'm sure there's some kind of, I think we actually can't afford not to do that. I think it's inhumane. How can we as a country say we're living up to our founding ideals if we don't do that?
It'd be crazy.
Didn't we give them to Ukraine?
Oh yeah, we're running out of all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true.
I don't understand. I also feel like I could do better talking to people who have strong arguments for immigration, because more and more, and maybe this is just the sphere that I'm living in, but people who I think of as moderate, even lean slightly progressive, are much more open to restricting immigration than I feel like they ever were in my lifetime. You know, and I think that should tell you how bad it's getting.
Oh, wow.
We have from Jason Hutchinson, taxation is theft, Hunter Biden is, and then he compliments him here. I'm not going to read it out loud because I'm not ever going to have a compliment to Hunter Biden come out of my mouth so that it can be clipped as if I'm complimenting Hunter Biden. But the next words he said, you go ahead, I'll say Hunter Biden is
Pretty based.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
It's just sick. That word needs the dignity of that word needs to be respected.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Thank you, Basecamp.
what about that? What about him is base?
Because taxation is theft.
'Cause he
so
didn't pay his
he was didn't
taxes.
paying his taxes. That's what they're
okay.
saying. I think that's sickening. I think that's sickening.
Yeah,
Listen,
it's pretty base to not have to be subject to.
But didn't he
exactly.
try to
It's
pay
pretty
them?
based.
I don't
It's
think so.
it's pretty based to not do what the peons have to do.
Yeah. When your dad is a career politician and the president, it's pretty base to abuse that privilege.
So I'm
Credit
gonna
where credit's due.
I'm going to read this next super chat just to let people know that I do give voice to opposing opinion, and if people say things that are incorrect, I'm willing to hear them out. So Sabi Vet says, first super chat for Shimcast. I'm loving Shimcast, but I'm still amazed Tim would leave a spoon thief in charge, give the people what they want.
What?
I can't read this next part.
Read it.
I can't.
Somebody read
You'd
it.
love it. Give up Brim or give
give
us
us-
Brimcast. Also, your name looks like CMUS.
She must. I don't
know
listen. This is
wow. The people have spoken and they want Brimcast.
Firstly,
How interesting.
Firstly, one person spoke. One person spoke, and this is exactly why we were having a conversation on the issues with democracy. I'm the monarch here.
Defensive.
Who are you? Turn your chair. You know what? Turn your chair around.
I will not.
I just want you to turn that chair around.
Nope.
When Tim gets back, you're in
Have
trouble.
we done a poll, Serge?
Yeah.
No, but we could do a poll. We could do a poll about that.
If I decide that I'm interested in entertaining such absurd questions, we will.
We've been taken over by a dictatorship. I'm concerned about it. No, I mean,
Tim
of
left me in
course,
charge.
I would be happy to. He did actually.
He said,
leave you
"Well,
in
I'm
charge.
gone. You're in charge." That's what he said to me.
I don't believe all of that.
Those are his words. He said,
I think you were just the one supposed to sit in that chair. The thing is, I will give Seamus a lot of credit. He is balancing so much right now. He runs his own business, Freedom Tunes, which is great, and also had that YouTube minute there, but they're back. So I, as much as I obviously would personally support and advocate for a Brimcast, I think we should give Seamus a lot of credit because
thank you.
He is he's accomplished a lot this week, and I think
Based.
that's cool.
Thank you. That's true. That's true. And I want to ask you all.
This is my diplomatic opinion. When the next election cycle comes up,
I'm sorry. Do you have personal and private opinions? Interesting. Like to see your emails. So I have a YouTube channel called Freedom Tunes that was taken down and it's back up, but we weren't able to. We usually release a video every Thursday, and we weren't able to. So I really want to ask you guys to go to Freedom Tunes and subscribe, please, because that would help us a lot. We were hoping we'd be able to get a boost in traffic on the video we released since I'm hosting the show. Since Tim left me in charge, couldn't happen because the channel was taken down this week. So I'm just going to ask you guys to go check that out. And also become members at freedomtunes.com. Become members at freedomtunes.com and you'll be supporting what I do. You'll be helping me get free of big tech, and you'll also get an extra cartoon each week, which exists behind the paywall. How's that sound? How do you like them apples?
Sounds like you're poaching Tim's audience for your own benefit, which does not sound like a very nice thing to do.
I'm not poaching his audience. I didn't tell them to
Tim.
unsubscribe from members at timcast.com. I think they should become members at timcast.com too. Hannah Claire, this is not a zero-sum game. The world's big enough for both of us. Well, at least me and Tim.
A shifty character. We just got to keep eyes on you.
A shifty character?
Is spelled Tunes.
Well, I would disagree. Your opinion means very little to me, Hannah.
I know, it always
Alberto
has.
Chipris, excuse me, I'm trying to read. Alberto Chipris says, I chatted yesterday about Vivek as VP and hope it didn't come off as too dismissive of him. I'm liking the guy in his message and hope the best for him, but as of now, I'm strongly supporting Trump. So here's the thing.
I think it's good to ask questions
It was
like
really
that.
dismissive, and you really upset him. No, he's fine. I mean, he's fine with all the questions that get asked to him, but I will say this. The man isn't running a vice presidential campaign. He's not spending vice presidential money on this. This man is running to be president. You know what? I will say this. I really enjoyed the conversation with him, and I think he went way deeper on his answers to the questions we gave him than any other presidential candidate I've ever heard speak on those issues.
Yeah, I got to agree.
He really cut into the spiritual core of the matter.
And
I was very impressed.
And that's great that he did it, and for the length of time he did it, because most presidential candidates, and having worked on several presidential campaigns, will do their fake town halls where the questions are and the person gets up there and says, Carter, good morning. My name is, and they know exactly exactly who you are, and they tilt their head and they say, that's a great question, Carter.
I always wondered
Thank
how
you.
they knew their names.
Thank you for asking me that. And let me just say that, and it's all scripted. So to sit in this type of forum where you get not only super chats, but you get each other, all of you, that's hard, and that's why candidates don't do it. And I keep advocating for this. My last little plug that I think is so important. Before the days of COVID, our politicians, especially our congressmen and women, used to do that in their districts during the summer. And then COVID happened, and they were like, we can't have town halls and then no one has brought that back, because no one who runs for Congress wants to stand in the high school gym and say, Carter, what's your question? Yeah. Like, what's your question? No, they don't want to listen, because so they hide behind the COVID and they're not bringing it back. The best thing you can do to get involved with democracy at the local level is force your politicians to stand there with a microphone in the gym and answer every damn question, and you will see whether or not they are worthy of the job.
Amen.
I think that's awesome.
Amen.
Yeah.
Completely agreed. We have from Fisher Kingston, Daniel. That's right.
That's
Are you ready for this?
Oh, boy.
Get prepared. Do you want to get your phone out, Google it? It's going to be a real tough one. Now, they're asking you, Daniel, so you support nuclear reactors? I think they meant do, but the question still stands.
Of course, I love nuclear power.
Okay.
Yeah, nuclear power works.
You love
efficient.
nuclear? Okay.
Yeah, we should have more. I'm fascinated in the growth of micro nuclear reactors. I think we should have as many of them as possible. I love nuclear reactors because they also require an awful lot of fossil fuels, and I love fossil fuels.
Can I ask you a question? I think I probably asked you this last time you were on, but how did you get interested in the energy industry?
I hated the lies of the environmental left. So to take on their lies, I had to learn this issue, and I hated the damage the environmental left was doing. Just the way the COVID people, the damage they did to 14-year-old girls committing suicide at what was it, 10 times the average rate. You know, and the damage that we do to people for an agenda, that's what got me involved in it, because the damage they do to rural America, West Virginia coal towns are not very far from here, and when you see the state of what we've done to those communities and the poverty we've left them in, it made me very, very angry. And I try not to be an angry person. You talked about anger before, but there is a righteous anger.
Yep.
Jesus made a whip out of cords and drew kicked them out of the temple, and sometimes I think we need that in our life.
No, look, I agree. Righteous indignation is important. You are definitely mild-mannered. I haven't seen you, and by mild-mannered, I don't mean like you speak your opinion, but you don't get angry with people when they challenge you, I've noticed. And I'll also say righteous indignation is very valuable, and an important point about that, about Jesus driving the bankers out of the temple, is you can do that. You can yell at people if you're also willing to die for them. That's another part of the story people forget. You got to be on that level. Cheers, and also depending on the circumstance, you can't just chase anyone out of everywhere, okay? But cheers to Daniel and Rick Whitbeck of Mine Pebble. Says cheers.
Oh, hey, thanks.
Cheers to Daniel and Rick Whitbeck of PTF.
Power of the Future.
Nice. I've seen the drive in both of you. Thank you for the voice you lend to responsible resource development. If it hasn't been grown, then it must have been mined.
Yes. Pebble Mine is the largest copper deposit in the world. We need a boatload of copper if we're going to go green. Your average electric vehicle has 70 to 90 pounds of copper in it. And so market forces would dictate that we need to mine more copper. But yet the same environmental movement that says we have to go green says you can't open Pebble Mine. It's bad for the environment. Well, and so we get our copper from third world countries mined by slaves.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. Aren't the components needed for these car batteries mined by child slaves?
Absolutely, around the world. And all of those components could be mined responsibly in America. We have almost all the raw materials we need if we were allowed to mine them. But yet the same forces that say you have to have this green agenda say, oh, you can't open these mines, it's bad for the climate. So why are we favoring mining? There's a reason why Nike makes their sneakers in China, right? There's the same reason why we want to get our cobalt, not from Minnesota, but we want to get it from the Congo. Heck of a lot cheaper. And it shows the true pernicious nature of this movement.
Well, and I think this is so interesting because it's the same people who are saying, we have to have higher standards, we need to not allow child labor, but they won't demand that manufacturing jobs come back to the U.S. where we could oversee this, right? I mean, it's complete hypocrisy.
Good union jobs. Good union jobs.
No, not for them. As long as they get their stuff cheap and they don't have to think about what's happening to children, and they could just say that conservatives are being mean to transgender identifying minors here, and they don't have to think about the lives that go into the cheap products they buy from Target, then it doesn't matter to them. There's complete hypocrisy. If you really believed in protecting children, you would bring back manufacturing jobs.
Well, it's also interesting because I mentioned earlier that what the left will do is they'll say, this really horrible, objectively evil thing is something people are going to do anyway, so we just have to let it happen so we can do it responsibly or have it done responsibly. And then what always happens is more people do it, and they're always wrong. But the one argument, or the one area where you actually can make that argument, is when it is something that isn't objectively evil. So with mining, for example, which is not objectively evil, there are evil ways of doing it and people are doing it in evil ways, and we're just letting them do it that way instead of doing it ourselves and driving them out of the market. That is actually one instance where us doing something could prevent people from doing it in an irresponsible way by reducing market demand for what they're doing. And we refuse. Crazy. Kyle Flower says, I have a friend that used to work for Democratic campaigns. He brags about how he was able to write off pot as a campaign expense. Well, you need anesthesia, don't you, to be working for a Democratic campaign. Not that I endorse that particular method. How sick. How sick. All right, do we have... Oh, sorry, did you guys want to comment on that? Anna Claire usually has something to say.
I'm not allowed to speak right now. I'm getting evil eyes from
Thank
Seamus.
goodness. Thank goodness she's gotten the memo. Jason Hutchinson
For
says,
someone who's asked me to be on
did you?
his
I thought you
podcast-
couldn't speak. I thought you couldn't speak. Are you going to make your mind up?
There's a lot of hostility here.
Jason Hutchinson
hostility.
says, eventually you run out of room on the balance sheet for BS and reality returns. Yeah.
Yeah.
True that.
Yeah.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
Man. We'll go with one more here before we sign out. I'm not going to read that nonsense.
Yes, dude, come on.
That's nonsense.
Come on. That's
It's
good.
nonsense.
That's good. I'm trying to pick the best ones, guys. It's hard. It's hard to work with this guy. You
Also,
know?
because Seamus is a tyrant is really what I've
He's
learned
only
this
reading
week.
the positive ones.
yeah,
I'm a
it's,
tyrant.
He's screening all the anti-Spoongate or the Spoongate ones.
well,
I can't allow misinformation to fly on Tim's
That's true.
podcast
That's
while he's
true.
gone.
I respect that. That's a standard to have.
Yeah, thanks.
You should censor
Thanks
the
for that.
misinformation ones on.
That's what I'm saying. We should fact check them.
You should get a tag on YouTube. Oh wait, we already did that this week.
that was a good one. I thought
Everyone,
that was a good
no,
one.
no, well, you were wrong about that. So we'll pick the one that was good.
We're just so dysfunctional without Tim.
Dude, you literally. All right. Okay. Boom. Wait, no, that's the wrong one. Dude, I found a good one, and then you stole. And then you scrolled, and now I can't find it anymore. This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable.
Carter, how are you doing?
Where
Trying
was
to
it?
Figure out how
Someone had said, and I want to give them credit.
Super chat.
I wanted to give them credit, but they were basically saying that I didn't do anything wrong, and you know.
Should we like look up for that one?
Someone
So
you
the evidence was withheld, and the evidence was withheld in my case. Is all I'm saying.
Seems like you're looking for the positive exculpatory.
No, I saw
evidence.
one, and someone whipped it away from me.
Someone, huh?
Here's actually a good
Someone,
one.
right? Okay.
Who else has got
Yeah,
the
you
mouse?
did, bro. You literally did.
Well, maybe we should just let this one go because it seems to be
No.
Now I
chaotic.
really want to know what it was.
Yeah, they literally just said that Seamus didn't steal the spoons. He stole potatoes,
paraphrase?
which was slander.
Oh.
They said Seamus didn't steal the spoons. He stole potatoes, but now I'll never be able to find and credit that
Is that
person.
a mean Irish joke?
Yeah, it's another one of these horribly
I hate
offensive jokes.
racist jokes.
Thank you.
Racist
And-
jokes have no place in this.
Thank you.
podcast.
Thank you. And you know what? I'll say this. I will say this though. The fact that they made that joke means that they're racist against me, and in spite of their racism, they were still willing to acknowledge that I had done nothing wrong. Doug Blask says, "Where are me Lucky Charms?" Someone, I got him. I whispered it. Yeah, I know. Doug Black said, "Doug Black." Hold on. I know why he's doing this. I know why he's doing this. So I'm just gonna give him what he wants because I'm a good host. Doug Blask says, "Where are me Lucky Charms?" He wants a clip of that. He wants a clip of me saying, "Where are me Lucky Charms?" And I
that was
kind of
nice
whispered
of
it.
you.
Yeah,
That was
I'm a
nice of you.
I'm a really nice guy.
He's a benevolent overlord
A
over
benevolent
here.
overlord. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that's about all we have time for tonight. Please become members at timcast.com so you can join us in the members only segment, which is going to start in about 10 minutes. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Always a good time. Daniel Turner, Power of the Future, powerofthefuture.com. Daniel Turner PTF on all platforms. And if you like sheep and you want to follow a great sheep farm here in Virginia, Bristol Farm, Virginia, the premier sheep farm of Virginia. I like to call it the premier sheep farm of Virginia. Good lamb and sheep photos. You'll get a kick out of it.
And no one's fact checked you, right? So why not?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's
I
great.
declared it thus. So thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you were here. I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for Timcast.com. You should go to Timcast.com, click on the read tab, and see all the work from me, Chris Bertman, Adrian Norman, all of our great journalists, our executive editor, Chris Carr, Cassandra. I really want to name everyone, but it's hard sometimes. You should also 100% follow at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram. It's the best. If you want to follow me personally, you can find me on Twitter at HCBrimlow or on Instagram at hannahclaire.b. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Hannah Claire, for inviting me on in place of Ian tonight. Thanks, Daniel, for coming out.
Invited you on?
No, I just lied.
He just showed up.
I never
just showed
questioned
up,
your
just
authority.
sat down.
Actually, you know what? No one invited me.
We made
But
him
you
put
can-
on a
yeah,
hat and jacket.
Exactly. They did make me put a hat on. My hair looked great, and I could tell that Seamus didn't like it. And Hannah Claire was like, "You should probably put a hat on anyway."
You asked me if you should put a hat on.
Yeah, well, you're looking at me like I
misinformation
should.
runs
Anyway,
wild. So you're Carter Banks.
I'm
Get a
Carter Banks. I do
haircut,
all the music
hippie.
stuff for Timcast Music. You can follow Tim's songs at Timcast Songs on YouTube. Follow Trash House Records on YouTube. We got a bunch of stuff coming out.
Yeah, that's my ask.
Including a music video that Ian is getting in shape for right now.
That's right.
You can follow me at Carter Banks 4L on Instagram, where I post pictures of my cat that my mom sends me. And
great,
at
yeah.
Carter Banks
It's true,
on
it's true.
Twitter. Serge.
That's great.
Yeah, it's true. I wait for your cats your
I
mom
try to do one a
sends you.
day.
Yeah, they're good. I am Serge.com. I'm trying to keep the show on the rails. You're doing a good job, Seamus. It's okay. You got one more day. You got this, buddy.
No, I know I got
Follow me
this.
on Twitter.
Oh, wait, can I say one thing before we go?
Sure.
Fine.
Yeah, I
why
run
not?
the show, so
Why not,
whatever you
Hannah
want.
Claire?
Tomorrow, I'm hosting Culture War live at 10 a.m. because Tim is, filming his feature-length film about his life as a skateboarder. Please join me. I think it'll be a great show. We have Mike Lindell and Matt Brainerd on to talk about election stuff and election security issues. I'm excited to host, and I hope you guys are there in the morning with us, although it's a long night for everyone here.
Tim is actually off chasing down the love of his life who's going to the airport so he can tell her how he feels right now. That's why he missed the show. My name's Seamus Coughlin. I run a YouTube channel called Freedom Tunes. We make cartoons. We got locked out of our channel for a week and we're finally back in. So I want to ask you guys to go over there and subscribe to Freedom Tunes if you like what I have to say. I also have a podcast called Shamer. I'm not going to be on Timcast next week after this. So if you like hearing what I have to say, go check my podcast out. It's on Rumble, rumble.com/Shamer. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the after show.